Welcome to my channel. In my channel, you can watch various type of fiction and fantasy audiobook. If you want more video like this, please subscribe my channel.
I was the Sea King in Greek mythology. Part 1. Absolute darkness shrouded everything. It was a profound depth where even time seemed frozen, a realm of nothingness where all things returned to silence. In this domain where even sound was swallowed, only the most primitive pulse of life, a faint sound of breathing, attested to the awakening of a certain existence. He opened his eyes. What met his gaze was a pitch-black, deathly silent cavern. The rock walls exhibited an unnatural smoothness, like a chamber formed by the inner lining of a giant organ, yet they eerily possessed the texture of stone. All around was silence, not even the faint sound of dripping water carving through stone existed. There was only the weak sound of airflow passing through his nasal cavity as he breathed. But strangely, despite being in such a gloomy cave, everything in his vision was clearly visible. The texture of the rock walls, the minute bumps on the ground, the winding outlines of the distant tunnels, every detail presented itself to his eyes in a way that transcended common sense, as if the darkness itself was making way for him, or as if his vision had long since escaped mortal constraints. This extreme contrast gave him a powerful sense of dissonance. "What's going on?" his whisper echoed in the silence. He tried to prop himself up, pressing his palms against the cold ground. The sensation wasn't like rock, but more like some kind of solidified organic matter. Memories surfaced like fragments. The final scene lingered on azure seawater. Sunlight filtered through the sea's surface, casting swaying spots of light. Schools of fish darted through coral reefs, and then, a sense of suffocation struck, seawater flooded his lungs, and his consciousness sank into darkness. He should have been dead. Before his chaotic thoughts could be suppressed, a rhythmic sound of footsteps approached from afar, breaking the silence. Tap, tap, tap. The footsteps were neither hurried nor slow, producing a slight echo in this completely enclosed space. The newcomer could be the only clue in this strange environment, perhaps even a lifeline, or maybe some unknown threat. He tensed his body, maintaining a wary posture as he looked toward the source of the sound. Muscle memory caused him to instinctively adopt a fighting stance, an imprint left by years of practice. Even if his consciousness wasn't fully awake, his body was already prepared to deal with danger. A figure emerged from the depths of the tunnel. It was a man, or rather, someone who looked to be in the transition stage between a boy and a young man. His black hair fell to his shoulders like ink, and his eyes were a pitch black deeper than the darkness itself. His entire being radiated an aura of gloominess that didn't match his age. He was sturdily built, with broad shoulders and a wide back. Beneath the simple robes wrapped around him, firm muscular lines were faintly visible. Seeing that the other party had no weapon, he felt slightly more at ease. He figured that, as a practitioner who had trained in martial arts for many years, escaping shouldn't be a problem as long as he didn't run into some armed professional. This judgment was based on his experience as a mortal, yet he had not yet realized that the world he was currently in was no longer a realm that could be understood by common sense. He stared at the other person with focused breath, only to see the black-haired man stop a few paces away and slowly speak. "Thou art finally awake, my brother. I thought thou wouldst only enter after being killed by Lord Father." After a brief pause, the black-haired man added, "Thou hadst such a peaceful look with eyes closed, thou truly didst sleep deeply." These words left him completely bewildered. What on earth was this? What father? What killing? 1 second he was struggling in seawater, and now he had suddenly jumped into a family drama. His brain worked rapidly, trying to find logic in this absurd conversation. The black-haired youth observed his reaction and clicked his tongue, his Chunibyo-like tone faltering a bit. "Tisk, it seems you haven't figured out the situation yet. We were swallowed into the stomach of our father, Cronus. Right now, we are living inside his belly." Cronus. This name was like a key, instantly unlocking a corner of his memory. Greek mythology. Titan king. Son of Uranus and Gaia. Swallowing his children. fragments of knowledge pieced together in his consciousness. Cronus, the second-generation god-king, feared the prophecy that he would be overthrown by his own children, so he swallowed each child into his stomach as soon as they were born. He had read this myth during his student days. Back then, he only thought of it as an absurd legend, never imagining he would one day experience it personally in this manner. Oh, your eyes have changed. Have you remembered the memory of being swallowed alive? The black-haired youth observed his reaction and put on airs again. It is only natural, as divine science, we are born extraordinary. Of course, I have only seen 3 of our kind, including you. At first, hearing that Chunibyo tone combined with that physique and attire, he thought the other person was doing some kind of cosplay. But when he truly noticed the natural perfection of the other person, something that could never be refined by cosmetics or masks, that thought was instantly shaken. It was an indescribable presence. The black-haired youth's skin emitted a faint luster in the gloom, like a glow originating from the very essence of life. His features were too perfect to be mortal, every line seemed meticulously carved by a divine craftsman, yet was perfectly natural. More importantly, there was that temperament, transcendent, ancient, carrying the unique detachment of divinity. Furthermore, when he looked down at his own hands, he found that he too presented a naturally holy appearance. His body was still his own, but his skin had become as fair as jade, his fingers slender and powerful, and his nails possessed a pearly luster. He touched his face, the contours were deep, the bridge of his nose high, and the sensation was so real it made his heart race. Divine Scion, the term echoed in his mind. If this was just a prank, the quality of the props and the actor was far too outrageous. Perhaps he could verify it in the most direct way. "What is your name?" he asked, his voice much steadier now. "Name?" The black-haired youth raised an eyebrow. "None was bestowed, thus I have none." He nodded and asked again, so, do you always talk like that?" The black-haired youth's expression froze, and a flash of embarrassment quickly crossed his face. His forced composure was almost impossible to maintain. This subtle change in expression suddenly made the whole scene feel real. Regardless of the other's identity, what was being shown now was the distress of a boy whose facade had been pierced. According to his vague mythological memories, the children of Cronus and Rhea were, the eldest daughter Hestia, followed by Demeter and Hera, then Hades, and finally Poseidon. Zeus was the youngest, having escaped only because Rhea swapped him with a stone. If it really was as he thought, then the one before him was likely the future king of the underworld. To think the most ancient underworld king was the most ancient Chunibyo. But since Hades was here, his other siblings were likely nearby. This realization eased his mind slightly, at least he wasn't trapped in this eerie place alone. Ahem, the black-haired youth cleared his throat, trying to save face. "That is to manifest my dignity as the elder brother, or more accurately, the only current male heir. After all, someone must lead everyone in the future." After confirming the other's identity, the bit of tension in his heart dissipated, and he couldn't help but chuckle. "Come on, we can't even get out of Cronus's belly right now. What's all this talk about letting? Let's focus on how to escape first, that's more practical." His tone was clearly teasing. Although he wasn't sure about Hades' specific personality in the myths, seeing that a god, even in his youth, had a temperament similar to a Chunibyo was quite amusing. But it made sense, the Greek gods were known for having distinct personalities no different from mortals. Watching a little kid insist on putting on an act to show off was indeed funny. Of course, given the current situation, he himself had certainly become a newly born deity. In the eyes of others, they were probably just a bunch of kids playing house. If one ignored the bizarre stomach they were currently in. Seemingly stung by his mockery, Hades's pitch-black eyes grew even gloomier, and wisps of black mist actually began to seep out from around him. The smoke seemed to be condensed from darkness itself, coiling around his arms and shoulders, carrying a heart-chilling coldness. He was not to be outdone. almost instinctively, a surge of power erupted from within his body. He clenched his fists, feeling a flowing energy gather in his palms as a faint mist filled the air. He glared back without flinching. The atmosphere instantly became tense. Two fledgling deities confronted each other in this narrow cavern, their not yet fully mastered powers clashing in the air, stirring up invisible ripples. Tisk, one black-haired brother was annoying enough, and now there's another blue-haired troublemaker. Men really are a handful. A crisp yet impatient female voice cut in, instantly breaking the tense standoff. The voice came from the direction of the cave entrance. He and Hades simultaneously withdrew their auras and looked over. At the entrance of the cavern stood three young girls. Their appearance seemed to instantly light up the dark space. Leading them was a red-haired girl with her hands on her hips, looking at them with a face full of annoyance. She was strikingly beautiful, her fiery red hair like dancing flames, extremely conspicuous even in the gloom. The strands were not static but drifted slightly, as if actual fire were burning within them. Her face was breathtakingly exquisite, her skin like snow, her lips like cherries, and her crimson eyes were currently flashing with a fiery light, like two burning rubies. She wore a simple white gown of thin fabric that, in the dim light, faintly outlined the curves of a body just beginning to develop. The calves revealed beneath the hem were straight and slender, her bare feet stepped on the ground, her ankles delicate and her arches graceful. But this beauty was completely overshadowed by her presence. Standing there, she was like a flame ready to erupt at any moment, stunning and dangerous. Slightly behind her stood two more girls. The one on the left had gentle platinum blonde hair that draped softly over her shoulders, emitting a soft luster like a hearth's new sprout in the gloom. Her temperament was serene, her features gentle, and her emerald eyes were like clear springs in a forest, quietly observing everything in the cave. She also wore a white gown, but her aura was completely different from the red-haired girl's. If the red-haired girl was a blazing fire, then she was a breeze, gentle, warm, and possessing a heart-soothing power. The one on the right possessed deep brown hair, its color like a wheat field in an autumn harvest, glowing with a warm luster in the faint light. Her hair was simply tied back, revealing a smooth forehead and a delicate face. Her eyes were clear as she looked over curiously, her gaze carrying a purity that had yet to experience the world. Her figure was the most slender among the three girls, and the white gown appeared somewhat loose on her, which only served to highlight a sense of fragile beauty. The three girls standing at the cave entrance formed a moving picture. Flame, breeze, and earth, three entirely different types of beauty converged here, yet were strangely harmonious. My sisters, ye have come. Hades's presence visibly shrank by a notch, and even the black mist retracted significantly. I told you, if you don't drop that disgusting tone, I'll beat you up, the red-haired girl said bluntly as she stepped into the cavern. Her strides were large, her hem fluttering with her movements to reveal a glimpse of her fair calves. As she approached, a faint fragrance like roses and fire filled the air. It's not that, our new brother is here, I must have some dignity. Hades tried to explain, but his voice grew smaller and smaller. Give it a rest. Dignity. You clearly wanted to fight him just now. The red-haired girl silenced Hades with just a few words. She walked between the two, glared at Hades first, then turned to the newly awakened him, sizing him up. She's probably Hera. The one in the myths who could keep Zeus in line. He made a judgment in his mind. According to myth, Hera was the goddess of marriage and childbirth, and also the queen of heaven, known for her jealousy and assertiveness. Looking at this feisty red-haired girl, he suddenly felt that those mythological records might not be groundless. This kind of personality was likely set from a young age. Just as he was observing that eye-catching red, Hera seemed to notice the scrutiny in his gaze. Her brows shot up, and she took several large strides closer, her aura like a big sister looking for a fight. Hey, blue eyes, what are you looking at? If you keep staring, believe it or not, I'll flatten your eyeballs along with that frame of yours. Hera stood firm in front of him, tilting her face up to glare at him. Although there was a height difference, her aura completely made up for it. Her face was very close, he could even see the fluttering of her eyelashes and smell that fragrance of roses and fire. Her eyes were truly beautiful, sparks seemed to jump deep within her crimson pupils, and her anger dyed her cheeks with a faint flush, adding a bit more splendor. Facing this explosive girl, he shook his head helplessly and asked, "Are you my sister?" "I suppose. Though just like that gloomy guy over there, you don't look like someone I'd like." Hera snorted, shaking her leg with a completely thuggish air. He reached out his hand and said calmly, "Nice to meet you. I am Poseidon. And you, what is your name?" "Huh." Hera froze. "A name, a way to address yourself," he explained patiently. Hearing this, the aggressive stance Hera had just now instantly collapsed. Her expression shifted from fierce to blank, and her face filled with the confusion and fluster of a girl her age who had been caught off guard. Her lips parted slightly as if she wanted to say something, but she couldn't find the words. Those crimson eyes blinked, and her fiery aura dissipated, replaced by a sense of bewilderment. It was no wonder, a god, who had been swallowed into a stomach immediately upon birth, who had never seen their parents, and had never even been given a name, would naturally be lost when faced with such a question. They possessed divinity and power, yet they hadn't even established the most basic self-identity. As for himself, from the moment he heard the name, Cronus, he had already made up his mind to call himself Poseidon. Since he had transmigrated into this mythological world and fit the characteristics of the sea god, with those deep blue eyes and the power of water surging within his body, he might as well go with the flow. Moreover, he had always liked the ocean. What makes you think you're entitled to have a name?" Hera shouted loudly to hide her embarrassment, though her face turned slightly red. That flush spread from her cheeks to the tips of her ears, appearing particularly stark against her fair skin. Her fingers unconsciously clenched, betraying her inner unease. Poseidon, that is, he wasn't angry. Instead, he found the sight of this feisty girl being rendered speechless rather amusing. He answered patiently, "Because I gave myself a name, Poseidon. It means, Lord of the Earth, Earth Shaker, and the ruler of the oceans, rivers, and lakes. The king of the sea." As soon as he said this, the cave fell into a brief silence. Not only was Hera stunned, but even the platinum blonde girl and the brunette girl who had been listening quietly, as well as Hades, who had been sulking just a moment ago, all gathered around. Their eyes were filled with wonder and longing. For these newborn gods who had been trapped in the God King's stomach since birth and could only piece together the shape of the world from occasional sounds heard from outside, every unfamiliar word from Poseidon's mouth held a fatal attraction. Earth, ocean, river, lake, lord, king, these words sent ripples through their blank perceptions, outlining the contours of the vast and mysterious world outside. Moreover, they also wanted to have a name of their own, just like Poseidon. It wasn't just a title, it was a confirmation of existence, a mark distinguishing I from the other, and the first step toward the awakening of self-consciousness. Even Hera, who had retreated to the side pretending to be uninterested, was actually eavesdropping quietly. Her body turned slightly toward Poseidon, and although her eyes were still deliberately looking elsewhere, her attention was completely captivated. Hestia, Demeter. Looking at the two girls before him, Poseidon had already matched them to their identities in his mind. The one with light brown hair and a gentle aura was Demeter, the future goddess of agriculture. The one with platinum blonde hair and clear eyes was Hestia, the goddess of the hearth and protector of the home. As for Hera and Hades, their identities were already obvious. What are the ocean and rivers?" Hestia asked softly, her voice as warm and soft as a spring breeze. She tilted her head slightly, her eyes full of curiosity, and she folded her hands in front of her in a quiet, elegant posture. "And what does Earth mean?" Demeter chimed in, her voice crisper and carrying the unique vitality of a young girl. "Lord, what does that represent?" Hades was particularly sensitive to this word. His black eyes stared intently at Poseidon. Clearly, this question touched a certain longing deep within him. 3 pairs of eyes, no, 4, including Hera's secret glances, all stared at Poseidon, filled with curiosity toward this youngest sibling who possessed such novel knowledge. In this moment, the order of their ages no longer mattered, knowledge had become the new authority. Poseidon could feel the eagerness in their gazes. Although these deities were born with power, they were still children mentally, full of curiosity about the unknown and possessing an instinctive hunger to understand the world. He suddenly realized that the role he might play in this small group wasn't that of the youngest brother, but rather a spreader of knowledge, a bridge connecting them to the outside world. All right, one at a time. I'll explain slowly. Poseidon waved his hand and found a flat spot in the center of the cave to sit down. The others exchanged glances and sat down around him, forming a small circle. I'll go first. Demeter spoke up first, her light brown hair swaying gently with her movements. What does Earth mean? It sounds wonderful. Also, where did your name come from? Did Mother choose it for you before you were swallowed? Her questions were innocent and direct. Poseidon noticed that when Mother was mentioned, the expressions of the others shifted slightly. Hestia pursed her lips, Hera looked away, and Hades remained expressionless, though a flicker of emotion crossed the depths of his eyes. These children, though they had never seen their mother, instinctively longed for maternal love and feared abandonment. First, the earth is the foundation beneath our feet that carries all things, Poseidon began to explain, using language he hoped they could understand. Imagine if this cave we are in right now extended outward and became infinitely vast, with flowers, grass, and trees growing on it, and all sorts of animals living there, with the sky above, that is the earth. Second, the name just appeared in my mind. It came to me naturally. Perhaps some information was instilled in me before I was swallowed by Father. The third question is similar to the second, so I won't repeat myself. He smiled, concluding his answer. After listening, Demeter nodded thoughtfully. In her view, the only one who could have instilled information into Poseidon was their mother, Rhea. After all, in this world, who would dare oppose their father, Cronus, the god king? Although she wasn't quite sure what king, or lord, meant specifically, the fear-filled voices she heard while inside her father's belly made her understand that those were existences of extremely high status. Those voices came from the Titans ruled by Cronus and the oppressed primordial gods. They would occasionally penetrate the god king's body and reach the stomach, bringing bits and pieces of information about the outside world. Originally, she had harbored an unease that their mother might have abandoned them, but hearing Poseidon say this, it seemed that wasn't the case. Their mother might have done something in secret to try and protect them. Hestia, who sat listening nearby, and Hera, who seemed indifferent but had secretly shuffled a few steps closer, both looked much brighter, just like Demeter. That subtle expression of relief, though it vanished in a flash, was caught by Poseidon. My turn. What exactly does Lord mean? Hades asked in a deep voice. He had little interest in the other topics. He didn't care at all if their mother had abandoned them. Or rather, he did care, but he used indifference to mask it. The only thing he cared about was what Poseidon had called the Lord of the Earth and Sea. This word touched a certain longing deep within him, power, control, and unquestionable status. It means, that which belongs entirely to me. For example, if this cave belonged entirely to you, then if my sisters and I wanted to stay here, we would have to get your permission. Simply put, it is absolute, unquestionable ownership. Poseidon explained. Upon hearing Poseidon's answer, Hades' eyes instantly lit up. That longing almost took physical form, burning in his pitch-black eyes. The word, Lord, perfectly matched his own perception of his status within this small group. As the only male before Poseidon's arrival, he had long viewed himself as the leader, believing it was his responsibility to lead everyone to survive here and eventually escape. Although his sisters, especially Hera, often didn't listen to him, he firmly believed deep down that he was a born leader. A good word, truly a good word, Hades muttered, as if savoring the taste of the term. Is it more powerful than king? Faced with Hades' follow-up question, Poseidon gave a casual nod. Hades immediately fell into deep thought, rubbing his chin, clearly pondering the differences and connections between the two concepts. At that moment, Hera sidled up to Poseidon. Her movements were light, as if she were afraid of being noticed, yet she couldn't help but draw near. She lowered her voice and asked awkwardly, "Can we also have names?" Her face was very close. Poseidon could smell the faint fragrance from her hair and see the trembling of her eyelashes. In this moment, Hera had retracted all her thorns, appearing fragile and expectant, her crimson eyes shimmering with cautious light. "Of course you can," Poseidon answered firmly. "Then, what are our names?" Hera was almost whispering. "Huh, you're asking me?" Poseidon was taken aback. "Nonsense. You're the only one here who knows about names." Hera showed signs of flaring up again, but this time her anger lacked conviction, it was more like a cover for her inner unease and longing. Poseidon felt a bit of a headache coming on. He called himself Poseidon purely because he knew a bit about Greek mythology and had always liked water and the ocean, having the most affinity for the sea god Poseidon. That was all. Judging from the current situation, he indeed seemed to be the youngest child, which corresponded to Poseidon's role. But, what if the real Poseidon fell in later? However, things had already come to this, so he could only commit to the error. In this world where chaos was just beginning to part, perhaps names themselves held power. To name was to create. What a hassle, can I just decide their names like this? He struggled internally. This was no small matter, he was naming the future god-king, queen of heaven, goddess of agriculture, and goddess of the hearth. If this was a true Greek mythological world, then his bestowing of names would have far-reaching consequences. Seeing Poseidon remain silent, Hera's awkwardness turned into agitation. She straightened her back and said loudly, "Why aren't you saying anything? Is it because you're the only one who gets a name? Is Mother only biased toward you?" Her voice echoed in the cave, carrying grievance and resentment. The others all looked over with complex gazes, expectancy, unease, and even a hint of jealousy. Poseidon covered his ears from her shouting, looking helpless. All right, stop yelling. Let me think." He steeled himself. Since things were already like this, he might as well take charge to the end. If this really was the world of Greek mythology, the names he gave would likely not be wrong. Even if they were wrong, who could blame a newborn god for having a faulty memory? They didn't know any better themselves. Besides, according to the mythological timeline, Zeus was the youngest. Zeus hadn't appeared yet, perhaps he never would, if history was changing. That's right, they're all just kids. Even if I get it wrong, it won't matter much. He comforted himself, though deep down he knew this decision could have unpredictable consequences. Then I'll just say the names based on the impressions that pop into my head. Poseidon cleared his throat and pointed to each of them in turn. His finger first pointed to the platinum blonde girl. "Sister with the platinum blonde hair, your name is Hestia." Then he pointed to the brunette girl. "Sister with the brown hair, you are Demeter." Next, he pointed to the red-haired girl. "You with the red hair, Hera." Finally, he pointed to the black-haired youth. "You with the black hair, Hades." "Those are the only ones I can think of." Poseidon paused and added, "As for the meanings, don't ask me, I'm not too sure either. These names just suddenly appeared in my head. Perhaps it was information left by Mother." The ones who had been given names reacted differently, but they all showed expressions of satisfaction. These names felt both familiar and right to them, as if they had always belonged to them but had simply been forgotten, only to be reawakened now. It was a resonance from the depths of their souls, a perfect match between essence and name. "Hestia. I am Hestia." Hestia repeated softly, as if confirming this newly acquired treasure. The name gave her a warm feeling, like a hearth fire, like a home, like something she was destined to protect. Yes, I am Demeter. Demeter smiled gently and nodded. When Poseidon spoke the name, she seemed to hear the sound of spring returning to the earth, smelled the fragrance of ripening grain, and felt the power of life growing and cycling. The name was closely linked to her, like roots buried deep in the soil. HMPH, Hera. Not bad. Hera turned her head away and spoke with a Tsunere air, but the corners of her mouth couldn't help but curl upward. When Poseidon said the name, her heart rate inexplicably quickened. The name sounded like it possessed some sort of inviolable nobility. She liked it. Hades. I am also very satisfied. It sounds full of power and majesty. Hades spoke with a hint of pride, a black mist once again faintly appearing around him. He didn't fully understand what the name meant, but he instinctively knew it was worthy of him. Poseidon looked at them and smiled. Good. As long as you're satisfied. Within Cronus's belly, time lost all meaning. There was no rotation of the sun and moon, no changing of the seasons, only an eternal, unchanging darkness. In a void where one could not see their own hand, the passage of time could only be vaguely perceived through the growth of their bodies and the settling of their divine power. Unbeknownst to them, the youths of yesteryear had shed their immaturity and grown into men of robust physique. The girls of the past had also quietly blossomed in the darkness, transforming into breathtaking goddesses of diverse charms. Bang, 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 bang. Dull thuds echoed through the empty chamber, each impact jarring Hera and making her feel a wave of irritation. At this moment, she was leaning against a relatively smooth rock wall, attempting to meditate and organize the increasingly surging divine power within her. But the thudding was so loud she couldn't find peace. Poseidon, enough. You're like a wild bull, crashing around every day. It's noisy. She snapped her eyes open, and real flames seemed to ignite within her crimson pupils, illuminating her gorgeous but angry face. The years had left no marks on her face, instead, they had tempered that brightness into something even more breathtaking. She wore a dark red gown manifested from who knows what, the fabric soft and clinging, outlining her mature, curvaceous figure, which now rose and fell slightly with her anger. In the distance, a tall and sturdy figure was throwing punches at a section of the constantly writhing stomach wall. Hearing Hera's angry rebuke, his movements paused slightly, and he turned around. His deep blue eyes were like deep-sea jewels in the darkness. His once slightly thin frame was now covered in solid muscle, his sea blue hair tied casually behind his head, with a few stray strands stuck to his forehead by sweat, adding a touch of wildness. This isn't just brute force, Hera. I'm looking for a rhythm. This world that traps us has its own pulse and weaknesses. My fist must find that point that can resonate with it, making it uncomfortable or even tearing it apart. Poseidon's voice was full of magnetism. He shook his wrists, where faint white marks on his knuckles were rapidly healing. I don't care about the pulse of whatever this hellish thing is. Didn't I say, if you dare go crazy while I'm meditating again, I'll melt you. Hera stood up abruptly, the hem of her gown tracing an arc and revealing her slender, fair ankles. Dangerous ripples of divine power began to emanate from her, and the air grew scorching hot. Poseidon had seen the power of Hera's spells. It was no joke. During that fatal crisis a few years ago, the magical talent Hera awakened under extreme pressure was terrifying. Now, after settling, it was even more unfathomable. He immediately raised his hands in a gesture of surrender, though a reckless smile played on his face. All right, all right, all right. I'm leaving. Can't I just leave? Before his voice even faded, he had already greased his feet and slipped away. Tisk, this crazy woman. Her temper truly grows along with her age and power. Poseidon grumbled to himself as he slipped away. But he had to admit, Hera's power truly matched her increasingly imposing queenly bearing. It wasn't just pungency, it was a high-level majesty rooted in divine power and wisdom. Oh, Poseidon, kicked out by Hera again. A gentle female voice sounded ahead. Demeter, with her long brown hair, stepped out from a corner, a soft halo of light held in her hand, illuminating her gentle and serene face. Her beauty was of a different style, like the fertile earth and vibrant fields, fresh, natural, and full of tolerance. A simple flaxen gown wrapped around her exquisite figure, and faint phantoms of wheat ears seemed to sway at the edge of her hem. Demeter, you should have seen Hera's face just now. She's definitely thinking up some sinister spell in her head to curse me. As soon as Poseidon stopped, he immediately began gesturing with an exaggerated expression. Demeter covered her mouth and chuckled, her eyes curving into crescents. Hee, isn't that because you're always asking for trouble? Still, Hera is actually grateful to you in her heart. Don't take it too personally. Poseidon only nodded like a chicken pecking at grain in response to Demeter's words, but his eyes were wandering, his mind already elsewhere. Grateful. He really couldn't stomach Hera's way of showing gratitude. It was better to find a safe corner quickly. Even being near Demeter wasn't necessarily safe. Who knew if Hera would come chasing after him? And so, while searching for a quiet spot, Poseidon reflected on his cultivation over the years. As a transmigrator who had arrived here in his own body, he seemed to have obtained Poseidon's divinity from the start, and his body had also been modified. It could be said that he had no blood relation to any of the gods in this Greek mythological world. They were more like colleagues from the same pantheon. Initially, he had only crudely attempted to tap into the potential of this divine body, mimicking the training methods of certain experts in his memory, using the purest power to strike at the toughest wall in this world. It was a bitter cultivation bordering on self-torture. Broken bones and torn muscles were commonplace. But the recovery power of a divine body was incredible, and pain became the best source for sensing the flow of power. After throwing who knows how many trillions of punches, quantity led to a qualitative change. His hearing was no longer limited to the sound of his fists breaking the wind, but reached deep into the moment after the fist made contact with the wall. That was the extremely subtle and complex vibration feedback coming from the depths of the wall, from the lowest level of this god-king's body, and even from this eerie space itself. It was the fluctuation of divine defense, the rhythm of life itself, and the texture of void existence. He called this the echo of the world. He became obsessed with it. In this eternal darkness and imprisonment, it became the only torch lighting his soul. He even began to try controlling the power of his entire body, imagining every bit of divine power and every drop of divine blood surging like a tide with a unique breathing technique, and then striking out with this gathered tsunami. Only Hera always seemed to dislike Poseidon's self-torturing style of cultivation, constantly nagging him from the side. Until one time, perhaps because Cronus was truly annoyed and felt murderous intent, he actually secreted a poison lethal enough for young gods. At the critical moment, it was Hera who, under immense pressure, instinctively erupted with a terrifying demonic god power, purifying the venom and protecting everyone. If not for that, Greek mythology might have come to an end at that very moment. It seemed that Poseidon's near-death-like tempering had indeed given Cronus a great sense of crisis. And after that time, it was as if a gate had been opened for everyone, their sleeping divine powers began to truly awaken. Hades even praised him for once, believing his harassment tactics were very effective, intensifying the father god's sense of crisis and forcing out everyone's power. Though after that, the things that occasionally flow in have become even more disgusting, but the result is good. Poseidon muttered to himself things that would surely get his head chopped off if Hera heard them. He kept walking and eventually reached a relatively warm and dry area deep within the cavern. An aura lingered here that was as reassuring as a home's hearth fire. Hestia usually stayed here. Her very existence could dispel a portion of the cold and desolation within the belly. "Yo, Hestia," Poseidon called out as he walked over. The goddess with long platinum blonde hair sat quietly on a flat stone platform, like a lamp burning gently in the darkness. Her long hair was like silk woven from moonlight, draped over her shoulders, making her quiet and beautiful face appear even softer. She wore an elegant white gown, simple in style, yet perfectly matching her serene and inclusive temperament. Seeing the overlapping red palm prints, physical, and a few scorched magic marks on Poseidon's chest muscles, she sighed deeply, her green eyes showing helplessness. Poseidon, did you make her angry again? Ha ha ha, I can't help it. If we want to escape this hellhole and take revenge on that old fool, how can we do it without getting stronger? Poseidon scratched his head, his smile bright. Looking at his hearty smile, Hestia's eyes instead showed a look of worry. You still haven't given up. Of course I won't give up. One day, we will escape. When that time comes, we must personally take down that old fool. Definitely. I don't know if that's possible. There's always a way when things come to a head. Don't worry, Hestia. Hades and I have been working desperately to get stronger. Combined with the power of you sisters, with the 5 of us together, can we really not deal with an old fossil discarded by the times? Looking at his deep blue eyes, which seemed to reflect the vast future ocean, Hestia fell silent. After a moment, a trace of an extremely gentle smile spread across the corners of her lips, like a spring breeze melting snow. Fine. Since you say so, then it must be possible. Come, sit down. You're here to hide from Hera again anyway, aren't you? Hee hee, big sister knows me best. As usual, Hestia patted her thigh, gesturing for him to lie down. Poseidon chuckled and, following her lead, walked over and lay on his side, resting his head on Hestia's warm, soft, and peaceful thigh. As the goddess in charge of the hearth fire, home, and the eternal sacred flame, Hestia's power naturally possessed strong healing and soothing properties. Hestia reached out her slender, jade-white fingers and gently stroked Poseidon's sea-blue hair. As for how long this rare peace in the dark prison could last, perhaps only the goddesses sitting high beyond the heavens weaving fate would know. And so, day after day, year after year, in the belly that still held not a single ray of light, the gods supported each other, tempering their bodies and the divine power hidden deep within their souls. Just as Poseidon had said, the only purpose of their lives was to seek revenge against the father who had swallowed them. And the thud, thud, thud of Poseidon's impacts became the only crude metric for calculating time within the world of the belly. Until that day, rumble, an unprecedented tremor suddenly struck. The entire space was no longer just experiencing subtle ripples, but was like a box held in a giant's hand and shaken frantically, tossing up and down, twisting left and right. The rock walls groaned under the overwhelming strain, and even fine cracks appeared. This commotion far exceeded what Poseidon's daily cultivation could cause. Hades' figure was the first to emerge from the shadows, his black clothes looking like melted darkness, his gloomy yet handsome face full of solemnity. Hestia let out a soft cry as she steadied herself. The halo in Demeter's hand wavered violently. Hera was directly shaken out of her meditation, her aura becoming chaotic and her divine power nearly backfiring. Almost by unspoken agreement, the 4 of them instantly gathered toward the area where Poseidon usually cultivated. Poseidon, what the hell are you doing now? Hera's voice arrived before she did as she was the first to charge up, delivering a flying kick without a second word. Ouch. Hera. It really wasn't me this time. I was just punching the wall like usual. Poseidon took the hit squarely, clutching his side. Hades looked at Poseidon rolling on the ground and let out a dark, mocking laugh. Tisk, tisk, tisk. Besides you, who else here could make such a big commotion? Could it be our gentle and quiet sisters? Shut up, you sarcastic fool who hides in the shadows all day. Poseidon glared at him. It seems you're really itching for a fight. The black mist around Hades began to churn. Thump. All of you, shut up. The situation is so critical, and you still have the mind to argue. Demeter, who usually never lost her temper, suddenly stomped her foot. A heavy, solid aura that seemed to make all things take root and fix in place radiated from her, forcibly suppressing the confrontation between Hades and Poseidon. If it wasn't Poseidon, then what could be the reason? Hestia, it's very likely that something has happened to that old fool outside. Just as Demeter suppressed those two jokers, Hades and Poseidon, Hestia and Hera had already begun their analysis. Hera, didn't you just kick Poseidon because you thought he was the one causing trouble? No, I simply wanted to beat him up. I just happened to have a decent-looking excuse. Hera answered as if it were the most natural thing in the world, glancing at Poseidon, who was still grimacing in pain. Oh, I see. That makes sense. Anyway, Poseidon is thick-skinned and tough, getting hit a couple of times won't hurt him. Exactly, my hands itch whenever I see him. But seriously, according to my magical perception, our father's body is indeed enduring some kind of intense external stimulation. The two goddesses discussed the justification of that kick to Poseidon in such flat tones. If Poseidon had been listening closely, he probably would have been hopping mad. In that case, we need to make an even bigger commotion. With that, Hera turned to the group, the playfulness on her face completely gone, replaced by a decisiveness and majesty befitting a queen of heaven. Right. By combining our divine powers and turning this place completely upside down, we might actually be able to get out. Poseidon struggled to stand up straight, a blue light burning fiercely in his eyes. Meanwhile, in the world outside Cronus' belly, the scene recorded in myth was unfolding. With the assistance of Mother Rhea and the planning of Métis, goddess of wisdom, the young Zeus successfully tricked his father, Cronus, into consuming an emetic potion provided by Lady Gaia, the Earth Mother. Wretch. As the potion took effect, Cronus, the second-generation god-king, the embodiment of time, and the ruler of agriculture and harvest, began to retch violently. His handsome but sinister face contorted as he stared fixedly at his wife, Rhea, not far away, and at the young son with brilliant golden hair, emerald eyes like thunder, and a divine shield in hand. Ah, cunning Gaia, you are a vicious woman who stops at nothing to achieve her goals after all. To control power, you don't hesitate to plot against your own husband and descendants time and again. Cronus' voice was broken by the urge to vomit, yet it was filled with deep-seated resentment. His gaze pierced Rhea, full of the pain of betrayal and tyranny. And you, Rhea, I never expected that even you would betray me. Finally, he looked back at Zeus. My foolish son, do you know that you are but another pawn in Gaia's hand? Do you know who drove that red-haired woman by your side? Young Zeus' chest heaved, his body already marked with many scars from the fierce battle, but his gaze remained as sharp as a newborn falcon's. Father Cronus, even if that were so, what choice would I have? Should I sit and wait for you to swallow me into that eternal darkness, just as you devoured my brothers and sisters? Facing Cronus' mockery, the young Zeus did not back down an inch. Having witnessed the cruelty of Cronus and Gaia, he had already weighed in his heart which side was more beneficial to him. Cronus looked at that face so strikingly similar to his own, his expression turning extremely dark. He knew in his heart that the medicine Rhea tricked him into eating was definitely intended to make him vomit out the offspring in his belly who had long since grown up. Otherwise, Zeus, Métis, and Rhea alone would be no match for him. The real threat came from the children within his belly, who had grown up filled with hatred. He could clearly feel the potion's power trying to pry open his internal space, which was sealed with the divine power of time. I must immediately freeze time in my belly. Time-space stillness. Without hesitation, Cronus activated his authority as the Titan of Time, forcibly slowing the flow of time in the abdominal region to a near-solid state. The spread of the potion's effect instantly stalled. Simultaneously, he reached back and drew the adamantine scythe that had once castrated and overthrown the first god-king, Uranus. The blade's cold light shimmered, carrying a terrifying aura that harvested all things and ended destinies. Be careful, my son. Cronus has frozen time in his belly, the potion's effect seems to have stopped working. Rhea was terrified, desperately casting layers of protection and buffing spells on Zeus. Zeus' expression changed as he gripped the aegis tightly. This divine shield, forged by Gaia from adamantine, was his greatest reliance at the moment. Zeus, stay calm. Focus on the battle. Mother and I will find a way to strike the time lock from the outside to help your siblings escape. Métis, voice came through, carrying the calm of wisdom. The battle erupted again, but it was even more treacherous. Cronus brandished the harvester's scythe while simultaneously manipulating the flow of time around Zeus, making it fast one moment and slow the next, causing Zeus' movements to repeatedly miss their mark and putting him in constant peril. Even more terrifyingly, as the god of agriculture, every one of his attacks contained the law-based power of inevitable harvest, a predetermined future, aimed at life and destiny. Zeus could only rely on the absolute defense of the divine shield and his agile movements to frantically dodge and maneuver, almost unable to counterattack. The scythe's blade grazed his forehead, shearing off a lock of golden hair. It slashed his arm, drawing a trail of divine blood. Had it not been for several crucial blocks by the Aegis, he would have been severely wounded already. My son, the way you roll about in distress is truly like a wild rabbit being chased from a field. If Gaia saw the pawn she painstakingly cultivated looking so pathetic, I wonder what she would think. Cronus mocked coldly, his scythe tracing a lethal arc of light. Zeus gritted his teeth and persevered, covered in blood. Rhea and Métis, watching from a distance, were anxious beyond measure. Mother, the other titans will likely notice the commotion here and arrive soon. Métis analyzed quickly. I know. Lady Gaia's ability to mask the secrets of heaven is also reaching its limit. As long as Uranus's curse remains, her direct intervention is restricted. Ray's face was pale. Zeus hasn't obtained his full divine name yet, and his authority hasn't manifested. If this continues. Ray's gaze shifted between her struggling youngest son and Cronus' seemingly impregnable belly. The key to breaking the time lock lay in a sufficiently strong impact from the inside. Children, if you can hear me, if your powers can gather. Just as Rhea was almost in despair and prepared to order a temporary retreat to seek refuge in Gaia's sanctuary to plan further. Thump, 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 thump. Dull thuds, incredibly heavy and sounding like the heartbeats of primordial giant gods, suddenly echoed from deep within Cronus' belly. The sound penetrated frozen time, pierced through the god king's physical shell, and echoed clearly across the battlefield. Immediately following that, even more varied and violent energy fluctuations erupted from within. The erosion of darkness, the roar of blazing flames, the pulse of the earth, the wild waves of the ocean, and another kind of pure, violent, infinite brute force that seemed ready to smash all shackles. Cronus' body shook violently, and for the first time, an expression of mingled horror and pain appeared on his face. The time-space lock in his belly, under the impact of 5 powerful divine forces converging at a single point from both inside and out, let out a clear sound of shattering. Mother. Zeus, spirit soared as thunder began to gather in his hands. Rhea wept with joy, the light of hope erupting in her eyes. It's them. It's my children. Métis, help me with all your might to strike the time node. Boom. Attacked from both inside and out, the time-space seal seemed to crack open a rift. Meanwhile, as Zeus and Cronus were in the heat of a bloody battle. Inside Cronus's belly, the eternal darkness was being stirred by a boiling turbulence of divine power. Hey, Hades, don't just focus on your own side. Didn't we agree to coordinate our power and blast a single point? Poseidon, with his bare, muscular upper body and wild sea blue hair flying, hammered his fists alternately against a section of the stomach wall that was squirming violently, trying to repair itself. Deep blue divine power flowed like raging waves, pouring in along his fists and tearing cracks into the incredibly tough inner wall. Not far away, the darkness seemed to come alive, converging into cold, sharp cones that struck the edges of the cracks Poseidon had created, constantly tearing the tiny wounds wider. Hades's figure was half hidden in the churning black mist, revealing only a profile with cold, hard lines. Hey, mind your own business, you fool. Watch your fists and don't interfere with my erosion. His voice was low, carrying his usual Chunibyo tone, but the ruthlessness and precision of his strikes formed a tacit understanding with Poseidon. Fool Chunibyo. Poseidon spat, but his movements didn't stop for a second. Instead, they became even more violent. He could feel that the defense of this wall was becoming shaky under the pincer attack from inside and out. I say, you men over there. Can you shut up for a moment and use your strength in the right place? Can't you see we sisters are almost exhausted? Hera's voice came, carrying obvious fatigue and impatience. She floated in the air a short distance away, her crimson hair moving without wind like a burning crown of fire. Her hands formed seals, and complex magic circles flickered before her, transforming her fierce and pure destructive divine power into continuous shockwaves aimed at the target area. Due to the high-intensity output of divine power, fine beads of sweat seeped from her smooth forehead, sliding down her exquisite cheeks and disappearing into her sweat-dampened collar. Her tight-fitting dark red dress outlined breathtaking curves that trembled slightly with the rhythm of her breathing and spellcasting, exuding the fatal charm of a mature woman. Beside her, Demeter and Hestia were also giving their all. Demeter was surrounded by a faint golden glow of abundance. She transformed her divine power into countless tough roots and vines, tightly entangling the stomach wall to restrict its self-repair, while continuously channeling the pulsating power of the earth to dismantle its structure from within. Her expression was focused, with a few strands of her light brown hair sticking to her sweat-moistened neck. Her gentle face was now filled with a sense of solemn power. Hestia spread her arms, her platinum blonde hair flowing with a warm halo like a hearth fire. Her divine power was not as violent as the others, but like an eternal sacred flame, it gently and firmly permeated the existence of the target area, weakening its divine foundation and providing continuous healing and status buffs for the other three. Her green eyes were full of worry, but even more so of unshakable persistence. "Ha! Hera, you're done already. It seems your stamina still can't match mine." Poseidon didn't forget to look back and make a snide comment during a gap in his strikes, sweat dripping from his well-defined jawline. "What did you say?" Hera's beautiful eyes widened, and the light from the magic circle in her hand suddenly surged, almost turning to blast Poseidon directly. "Enough, Poseidon. Stop provoking her and get to work." Hestia sighed helplessly, a wisp of soft firelight separating to brush over Hera soothingly, while also scorching Poseidon as a warning. "Hades, you too, be careful to conserve your divine power." Demeter's steady voice smoothed the agitation like the earth. Hades and Hera exchanged a glance, but ultimately said nothing more, refocusing their entire attention on the wall before them. They weren't truly angry, rather, they had formed a unique way of communicating during this long imprisonment and fighting side by side. All personal grudges could be temporarily set aside in the face of the two overriding goals: escape and revenge. Thump, 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 thump. With the internal impact and external force working together, they could feel a certain solid shackle letting out a groan. Outside, in front of the God King's palace at the summit of Mount Olympus, Rhea listened to the dull thuds coming through the God King's body, her face covered in tears. "Mother, that's right, it's my children, they never gave up, they are responding to us from inside." Métis supported Rhea, who was weak from performing a large-scale spell, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Rhea wiped away her tears, her gaze toward Cronus turning incredibly cold, a deep-seated hatred woven from a betrayed wife and a mother aching for her children. She forced her body up, the power of the Titan Queen trailing light in the air as a magic circle complex enough to trigger the underlying rules of the world quickly took shape. "Métis, lend me a hand. Strike the temporal node. We must completely open the internal passage and let Gaia's medicine resonate with the children's power." "All right." Métis unhesitatingly poured her vast divine power into Rhea's magic circle, her red hair flying and her expression as solemn as a sacrifice. Meanwhile, Cronus, who was wielding his scythe and driving Zeus into a corner, showed an undeniable panic for the first time upon hearing the increasingly loud thuds from his belly. Within his time stillness domain, such a level of impact could still erupt. These children, who had grown up in the darkness, their power and will far exceeded his estimations. Zeus was certainly as annoying as a flea, but those few in his belly, they had grown into monsters capable of threatening his very foundation as the god king. Cronus's handsome face contorted as he was forced to divert more than half of his focus and divine power to frantically reinforce the temporal seal in his stomach, attempting to suppress the terrifying internal riot. This momentary distraction significantly reduced the pressure on Zeus, giving him a precious moment to catch his breath. Ha 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 ha. It seems my brothers and sisters inside are making an even bigger ruckus than I imagined, my dear father. Zeus panted heavily, throwing away the hilt of the lightning sword that had long since been severed by the scythe. He gripped the Aegis shield with both hands, a fierce battle intent reigniting in his eyes. Foolish. Even so, do you think you can change anything? Cronus growled, swinging his scythe again. Whoosh. The scythe's blade was still lethal, but Zeus's dodging was no longer as perilous as before. He tried to counterattack, but whenever he attempted to close in, the flow of time around his body would become exceptionally thick and sluggish. The only good news was that because Cronus had to divide his attention to suppress his interior, small gaps appeared in his control over the time surrounding Zeus. Just as Cronus focused the vast majority of his attention on the two battlefields, inside and out, he failed to notice that the composite spell cast by Rhea and Métis had quietly been completed. Father, the biggest difference between you and me is. Zeus caught a fleeting opportunity and suddenly charged forward with his shield raised, shouting loudly. I have never been fighting alone. What? Cronus's pupils shrank. Only now did he notice the fluctuations of the spell enveloping the battlefield. Rhea. He let out a roar of extreme fury, wanting to stop it, but it was already too late. The light of the spell instantly swallowed Cronus. The emetic effect, which had been locked by temporal divine power, completely erupted under the strong internal impact and spell enhancement. Bleg, cough, cough, cough waagh. An indescribable, violent reaction exploded within Cronus, and the temporal seal on his abdomen shattered inch by inch. He could no longer suppress it. Accompanied by an earth-shattering vomit that seemed as if he would throw up even his internal organs. Thump, 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 thump. 4 figures, wrapped in their respective surging glows of divine power, shot out from Cronus's mouth one after another, landing on the ground and revealing their forms. First was Hades, surrounded by a cold, deathly black mist, his black clothes fluttering, his face gloomy and handsome, his eyes like an ancient frozen pond. Next was Hera, surrounded by flames, her crimson hair flying. She landed barefoot, her long dress blooming like a fire lotus, her bright face carrying the sternness of having escaped in a lingering anger. Then came Demeter, clad in a faint golden glow of abundance. She landed with an elegant posture, her gentleness carrying the stillness of the earth. And finally, Hestia, radiating the tranquil aura of a warm hearth fire, her platinum blonde hair flowing with a soft halo, her green eyes scanning everyone with concern. The last one to come out was Poseidon, holding a huge rock in his arms. His landing was the most flamboyant. With a thud, the ground vibrated slightly. His sea blue hair was wild and unrestrained, his bare upper body had smooth and perfect muscle lines, and his face wore a hearty, uninhibited laugh. Ha 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 ha. This is the air of the outside world. The smell of freedom. Poseidon, watch your manners. And why did you bring out that useless rock? Hera frowned, her crimson eyes sweeping over the rock in his arms. Hey, Hera, don't be so mean to old reliable. At least it accompanied us silently in that dark place for so many years, consider it a friend in adversity. Poseidon playfully patted the rock in his arms, while Hades, seeing this, gave a light click of his tongue. Tisk. As a deity, your taste is truly beyond saving. Just like your words and actions, they are insufferably frivolous. Hades, I call this being spontaneous. It's better than your lifeless Chunibyo tone. You fool, do you want to fight again? The black mist around Hades churned. You two. You're still arguing after getting out. Look at the situation we're in. Demeter's gentle voice took on a rare severity. Demeter, don't be angry. I think it's good that they're so energetic. Hestia smiled to smooth things over, her gaze always softly watching Poseidon. Hestia, you just spoil him too much. Demeter shook her head helplessly. As soon as these five appeared, the powerful divine aura and unique temperament they naturally exuded instantly captured all the attention on the battlefield. Zeus, covered in blood and panting heavily. Cronus, hunched in pain from the violent vomiting, the backlash of the medicine, and the impact of the spell, his face contorted. And Rhea and Métis, their faces pale from the severe depletion of divine power after casting the great spell. At this moment, their gazes all involuntarily turned toward these five young deities with different hair colors and extraordinary temperaments, who even in such a grim and tragic battlefield appeared to be at ease. It seems the situation now is that Zeus, with the help of Rhea and that red-haired goddess, drugged Cronus. But this blonde little brother looks like he's been beaten pretty badly. Is he really the future god king? Poseidon bickered with Hades on the surface, but in his heart, he saw the situation on the field more clearly than anyone. AI model, Gemini 3.1 flashlight. Zeus, Cronus, the suspected mother Rhea, and her helpers. The lines between friend and foe were clear at a glance. Just as Poseidon was rapidly sorting through his thoughts, the young Zeus forced himself to straighten his spine, and using the tone he considered his most charismatic, he called out to his newly appeared siblings. "Oh, my siblings of shared blood. I am your youngest brother, Zeus. Please lend me your strength, let us fight side by side, and together overthrow this father who harms his own flesh and blood and acts with such tyranny." When Zeus made his request, he was actually very nervous inside. These older siblings of his looked ridiculously strong. That bottomless depth of divine power, that aura of oppression naturally radiating after being forged through trials, even though he, Zeus, had also endured hardships, awakened his destiny, and learned various skills outside, he didn't know why, but when facing these five, he felt as if he were a head shorter than them. What the hell? What kind of ghost is this? This way of talking, is this going to be another Hades Pro Max version? Poseidon, what is the meaning of your nonsensical words? Are you insulting me? If you can't understand it, how do you know it's an insult? Idiot. You fool. Upon hearing Zeus's tone, Poseidon instinctively blurted that out, his face full of disdain. Having won Hades was already enough to deal with. If another Chunibyo Zeus came along, he would really lose it. And Hades was truly angered this time by the evaluation of Hades Pro Max version, and his black mist instantly boiled. On the other side, Zeus was left a bit bewildered by Poseidon's sharp retort. This dignified and majestic tone of his had always been effective, whether in front of the nymphs who raised him, the profoundly wise Métis, or even the majestic mother goddess Rhea, it had always easily earned him attention and favor. But looking at them now, not only the blue-haired brother Poseidon and the black-haired brother Hades, but even the red-haired, stunningly beautiful sister Hera, as well as the brown-haired Demeter and platinum-haired Hestia sisters, all wore expressions of indifference, helplessness, or furrowed brows. Their minds at this moment seemed more concerned with stopping their brothers' bickering than with dealing with Cronus. Well, my brothers and sisters, shouldn't we focus our strength now to deal with our father? Zeus's voice grew quieter and quieter, his confidence clearly lacking. He should have launched a fatal strike while Cronus was at his weakest, tormented by Gaia's potion and vomiting, but encountering this awkward situation of being completely ignored for the first time caused Zeus, who had always been regarded as the hope and core, to inexplicably lose some of his confidence. After all, ever since he could remember, everyone around him, from the fairies, nymphs, and even Métis and Rhea, had revered him as the savior in the prophecy, treated him with great courtesy, and no one had ever disrespected him like this. Seeing Zeus get snubbed and look dejected, Rhea felt heartbroken, and Métis could sit still no longer. Brothers, Now is not the time to argue over such trivial details. Métis stepped forward, stood in front of Zeus, and while supporting him with concern, she swept her gaze, filled with anxiety and a hint of dissatisfaction, toward Poseidon and the others, her tone severe. You must immediately seize the opportunity to overthrow Cronus. The army of the Titans could detect the disturbance here and arrive at any moment. Please assist Zeus immediately to defeat Cronus, that is the most important thing. Because her beloved Zeus was being slighted, Métis, the goddess known for her wisdom, could not help but have a tone filled with urgency and accusation. Hey, what kind of little cookie are you? Daring to point fingers at our sibling affairs. This remark hit exactly on Hera's trigger. Hera, who had been standing with her arms crossed, watching Poseidon and Hades bicker like children with a look of disdain, had her eyes turn cold. Her crimson pupils locked onto Métis, and the already scorching fluctuations of divine power around her body suddenly boiled. As the goddess who most perfectly inherited Re's bloodline and the destiny of the Queen of Gods, the magical power and divine might that Hera had awakened and honed within Cronus's stomach were of an intensity and purity that the still green Métis could never imagine or withstand. Moreover, the target Hera had been sparring with day after day in the stomach was based on Poseidon. And this Poseidon, his body had long been tempered through countless self-destructions and rebirths to be comparable to the Titan Atlas, who bore the heavens. The surging divine power within him had already awakened for the most part, far exceeding the records of the original myth. He had even developed a technique called flow field propulsion, capable of using the power of the sea to push the power of the world. He was an out-and-out monster who broke through finesse with raw power. Incidentally, in order not to be outdone by Poseidon, or rather to suppress Poseidon, Hades's power had also risen with the tide under this competition, and his divinity of darkness and death grew increasingly profound and terrifying. Therefore, Hera, Demeter, and Hestia, who had been honing themselves and growing together with these two monsters for years, had long since broken through the framework of the original myths, reaching a height that was difficult for outside gods to comprehend. Feeling Hera's undisguised and terrifying divine might crushing down, Métis instantly turned pale. Even with her wisdom, she had never expected the other party's reaction to be so intense, or their power to be so far beyond specifications. That was not just a gap in power, but in crushing of will, tempered through dark imprisonment and life and death trials. At the critical moment, bang! A soft yet incredibly solid curtain of light blocked in front of Métis, resisting the impact of Hera's invisible pressure. Re's figure stood in front, and although she was tired, the foundation of the Titan Queen remained. Phew, although she is my daughter, this power is truly astonishing. She hasn't even truly acted yet, and just her aura alone is already like this. Rhea sighed softly, her gaze toward Hera complex, filled with both amazement and apology. After all, Rhea was the queen who had once ruled a generation of titans. Even though Hera had infinite potential, in terms of divine power accumulation and the completeness of authority, she could not yet be compared to the true previous generation queen. I apologize on her behalf for this child's slip of the tongue in her anxiety. She holds no malice, it is just that we all desperately hope to end all of this and overthrow Cronus, Rhea said sincerely. Hera looked at Rhea, who had easily blocked her pressure, her stunning face growing colder, her red lips pressed into a straight line. She, Demeter, Hestia, as well as that annoying Poseidon and the gloomy younger brother Hades, had already reached a consensus back in the stomach. They did not intend to acknowledge this pair of so-called parents. One swallowed them into eternal darkness and imprisonment. The other, perhaps had hidden reasons, but ultimately failed to protect them, and now that she had suddenly appeared, she was demanding they assist another strange brother, in the capacity of a mother. Therefore, even when facing the apology and request from her biological mother Rhea, Hera felt no ripples in her heart, and even felt strong resistance due to the other party's matter of course attitude. Just at this moment, a warm and powerful hand gently rested on Hera's head. It was Poseidon. He did not know when he had ended his childish argument with Hades and wandered over to Hera's side. Those sea blue eyes were carrying his habitual smile, looking at her with a bright expression, making Hera pout slightly. Hera, what are you pondering here all alone? Your expression is so serious, as if you're about to do something world-destroying, he said with a grin. Poseidon, done arguing. Hera glanced at him sideways, her expression relaxing slightly. As if, arguments with that guy are endless, Poseidon laughed, leaning closer, almost able to smell the scorching fragrance from her hair. However, seeing my dear Hera furrowing her brows, looking like she was about to make an enemy of the whole world, I couldn't help but come over to take a look. HMPH. You're the only one with a sweet mouth, and no seriousness. Hera snorted softly and turned her face away, but her tight lips seemed to loosen a bit. All right, Hera, don't think about it so complicatedly. Isn't our goal simple? First, let's give that old fool who swallowed us for so many years a good beating, beat him until he regrets ever being born. Poseidon retracted his smile, spread his hands, and said to everyone around him, as for the rest, whoever stands in our way, or wants to teach us how to do things, then why not just persuade them all together? If you think too much, your hair will fall out sooner or later. Tisk. Only a guy like you, whose brain is full of seawater, would think of things so simply. However, it is indeed time to end this. Hera couldn't help but click her tongue softly and shook off the hand Poseidon had placed on her head. But after being stirred up by Poseidon like this, the bit of resentment in her heart did indeed dissipate quite a bit. Yes, why think so much? They had been honing their power day after day in that darkness, wasn't it just so that one day they could take revenge with their own hands? Hera didn't even look at Rhea and Métis again, turning her head directly, her gaze landing on that youngest brother. He was quite handsome, with a standard playboy appearance, exactly the type Hera hated the most. But considering he got everyone out, she would barely count it as a contribution. Hey, the blonde one over there. Is that calling me? Zeus paused, pointing at himself. Nonsense, besides you, who else here is blonde? Hera said impatiently. Hurry up and get up, now we are going to teach that father of ours, who is about to recover, a good lesson, so he knows what price to pay for swallowing things he shouldn't have. She said as if bestowing charity. Considering you count as our brother and have contributed a little bit of meager effort, you are permitted to participate. Zeus listened to Hera's words in a daze, nodding subconsciously. But then he reacted, and a sense of absurdity surged in his heart. That's not right. Since we are going to fight, wouldn't it have been better to just sneak attack while Cronus was unable to move earlier? Why wait for him to recover? When Zeus voiced this thought, Hera's anger erupted like a volcano once again. What did you just say? You actually dare to suggest that I, Hera, and my siblings go and do that kind of despicable, shameless act of taking advantage of someone's vulnerability? Poseidon glanced at Hera, who was venting her rage frantically in the back, and shook his head helplessly. He then looked toward the distance at Cronus, who was slowly straightening his body. Relying on his extraordinary senses honed in the endless darkness, Poseidon could clearly perceive that while he and Hades were seemingly engaged in a pointless argument just now, Cronus had actually already recovered his body. But Poseidon bet that the gloomy Hades must have noticed this as well, and likely even Hera, who was currently throwing a fit over there. However, with Hera's pride being so high it bordered on paranoid, she was probably just watching coldly from the sidelines, wanting to see what tricks this despicable father could play, while incidentally letting that arrogant blonde little brother of theirs suffer a bit. Hey, I say, even though this is our first meeting, isn't your acting a bit half-hearted? You're actually lying on the ground playing dead just to scheme against a few children who were born not long ago. Can the dignity of the Titan King really be thrown on the ground and stepped on so casually? Poseidon let out a light chuckle, stretching his neck. There wasn't a hint of reverence in his sea blue eyes, only naked mockery. Faced with Poseidon's ridicule, Cronus only gave a cold sneer, completely unmoved. HMPH. Looking at that sea blue hair, you must be Poseidon. Rhea and my loving mother, Gaia, I am fully aware of all the names they quietly prepared for you. His cold gaze swept over the group. The black-haired one is Hades. Behind you are Hestia and Demeter. And over there, the one whose temper is redder than her hair, my dear daughter, Hera. And what of it, my great father? Poseidon raised an eyebrow and grinned, revealing forest-white teeth. To know a name is to know the essence and source of your power. Moreover, your divine names haven't even truly awakened halfway yet. You are nothing more than fledglings with nothing but brute force. Tisk, you really are a wordy and self-righteous old fogey. Go eat shit. As soon as he spoke, the smile on Poseidon's face vanished instantly, and he directly raised his middle finger. Before his voice had even faded, the ground beneath his feet exploded with a bang. Poseidon's figure, carrying the purest speed and power, crashed straight toward Cronus. Although I don't understand what that gesture means, it feels quite infuriating, my dear son. Cronus, who had long since recovered his state, also had a cold light burst from his eyes. The adamantine sickle, in his right hand, which had once castrated the sky and harvested royal power, swelled against the wind, slashing toward Poseidon. Clang! Fist and sickle blade, flesh and divine artifact, clashed head-on. The sound that erupted at that moment was like the dull roar of two continental plates colliding. A terrifying shockwave exploded in a ring, plowing the already messy ground several feet deeper, and even the distant mountains trembled. This scene was completely different from the battle before, where Zeus had struggled to maneuver through narrow escapes. This was the most primitive collision of power, a direct crushing of authority against authority. On one side was Cronus, the harvester and lord of time, who had personally severed the genitals of the first god King Uranus, ended the age of sky, and made all the original Titans submit. On the other side was Poseidon, a monster who, in the darkness of his father's belly, had tempered his divine body to an incredible realm through a method that could be called self-torture. His divine power surged like an abyss, and he had already touched the edge of the Sea King authority. Bang, 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 bang. Collisions occurred continuously in an instant. Cronus swung his sickle, which contained the laws of harvesting. Wherever the blade's light passed, space itself seemed to be sliced into pitch-black thin lines. And Poseidon's response was always only those fists wrapped in deep blue divine light, which seemed capable of smashing stars. What was most shocking, even terrifying, was that divine sickle blade, forged by the mother goddess Gaia from the hardest metal and capable of severing the strongest Titan's divine body, actually only produced dazzling sparks when it struck Poseidon's fists and arms, unable to leave even a scratch. Impossible. Even Cronus, after his sickle was once again blocked head-on by a fist, couldn't help but squeeze those words out from between his teeth. For the first time, a clear look of shock appeared on his face, which was usually shrouded in gloom and majesty. Even if you were of my bloodline, just how was this body of yours tempered? To be able to clash head-on with Gaia's adamantine without being damaged. Ha 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 ha. Poseidon laughed wildly, taking the opportunity to throw a heavy hook toward Cronus's cheek. The latter dodged it by tilting his head in a close call, the wind from the punch grazing his cheek and leaving a scorching air trail. That only shows that the other gods are too weak. Steel. Divine artifacts. Before a divine body tempered to the limit, they're all just things that can be smashed. But Cronus was, after all, a king who ruled an era. After the initial shock passed, he completely set aside his contempt and scheming, beginning to display the full authority that truly belonged to the god of agriculture and time. The light on the sickle became dark and lethal. In the next clash, slash, a bloody gash was finally sliced open on Poseidon's blocking arm. Golden divine blood splattered. That was not just a physical cut, it also contained the divine power of harvest. It was as if the defense of Poseidon's arm was being harvested like a fruit, making it easier for subsequent attacks to leave wounds. Not only that, Cronus began to manipulate the local flow of time around Poseidon. It wasn't a large-scale change, but rather, at the moment the sickle swung, it caused a minute delay in Poseidon's blocking or dodging movements. In a peak-level duel, such a delay was often fatal. The harvest authority, combined with local time manipulation, allowed Cronus to grow stronger as the battle progressed. The more fiercely his opponent resisted, the more bountiful the results he harvested, and the deeper the influence he applied. This is troublesome. Poseidon felt a chill in his heart. This old guy was even more difficult to deal with than expected. His divine name, Sea King, hadn't fully awakened yet, and his use of authority was far less smooth and seasoned than Cronus's. If they continued this pure clash of power, the situation would gradually turn against him. After all, what Cronus was harvesting was the very fruit of power that Poseidon had tempered so painstakingly. Hera, I think you've watched the show long enough. Is the magic circle still not done preheating? Thus, Poseidon retreated behind Zeus and decisively began calling for backup. Against an old schemer who devoured his own children and set traps for ambushes, why bother with codes of honor? After all, for a protagonist, isn't the core quality to be unconventional? Just look at Cronus's face, which froze instantly. This guy couldn't possibly have thought that after experiencing that kind of imprisonment and torture, this group of children would still talk to him about some father-son duel, could he? Didn't some blue-haired fool just act like he was going to handle everything alone? How can you not hold out anymore? Her words were sharp, but her actions weren't slow at all. Crimson magical radiance flowed between her fingers like a living thing, instantly completing the outline of the final rune. Hera, I call this assessing the situation. It's much more upright than some guy who's been hiding in the shadows waiting to pick up the spoils, right? Arg. Before he finished speaking, Hades, who had been hiding in the dark waiting for an opportunity, suddenly struck, giving Cronus a vicious blow. Shut up. When it comes to being sinister and shameless, no one can match even a fraction of you, Poseidon. Half of Hades's figure emerged from the shadows as he officially joined the fray. His fighting style was completely different from Poseidon's wild ferocity and Hera's brilliance. It was the ultimate in trickery and lethality. He never clashed head-on, his form flickering between reality and the cracks of shadows. Every time he appeared, it was accompanied by a burst of deathly divine power, specializing in attacking Cronus's lower body. Hades, how can you call this sinister? It's clearly this, Lord Father, who lacks dignity, using his fully awakened divine name to bully children who haven't grown up yet. Besides, the pressure on Poseidon was immediately greatly reduced, and his spirits lifted. His punches became even more expansive and bold, forming a perfect complement to Hades's sneak attacks. He grinned, revealing a smile mixed with madness and coldness. This is foolish war. This is revenge. Who's talking to you about fairness? Poseidon rarely says anything sensible. This is indeed an adult shamelessly bullying children. We are at most bullied children uniting for legitimate self-defense. As Hera finished her sentence, she pushed her hands forward. Buzz. Countless crimson magic array patterns appeared out of thin air, layered upon each other, instantly enveloping the area where Cronus was. Binding, weakening, divine power interference, elemental riot, all sorts of insidious and efficient battlefield spells erupted simultaneously, like a set of magnificent shackles tailor-made for Cronus. Hera floated in midair, her red hair like flames and her long dress fluttering. Her beautiful face wore a cold and gratified expression. Yes, Poseidon is right. Demeter's gentle words came as she stood a short distance away, her hands pressed against the ground. Pale golden abundance divine power surged into the earth. The next moment, the ground beneath Cronus's feet suddenly became like quicksand, and countless incredibly tough divine power roots burst from the soil, wrapping around his legs. This wasn't meant to cause damage, but to interfere with his movement, pouring the stagnation and growth power of the earth back into his body to disrupt his divine power flow. Correct, this was always an ugly act of bullying that should never have happened. Hestia also spoke softly. She opened her palm, and a ball of pure white, warm, seemingly eternal flame burned quietly in her hand. This flame emitted a strange halo that enveloped a corner of the battlefield. Within this halo, Cronus's manipulation of local time seemed to encounter some unspeakable interference, as if a turbulent river had been led into a calm lake, its power greatly reduced. Poseidon, Hades, Hera, Demeter, Hestia. The 5 siblings joined forces under the light for the first time. The synergy and terrifying combat power they displayed shocked all onlookers. Earlier, Poseidon alone could maintain an undefeated state with his monster-like divine body. Now, with the 4 siblings each showing their prowess and striking from different dimensions, Cronus was instantly plunged into a desperate situation, struggling to cope. True, he possessed a complete and powerful divine name, and his use of authority was consummate. But these 5 siblings each had frighteningly high talent, and the practical combat abilities they had honed against each other in the dark cage far exceeded those of ordinary gods. Demeter used the power of abundance for binding and erosion. Hestia used the eternal fire to smooth the wrinkles of time. Hera's spells were like a dragnet, pervasive. Hades's deathly sneak attacks were impossible to guard against, and Poseidon took most of the pressure head-on, ready to erupt with iron fists that could shatter everything at any moment. Under the 5-fold strike, Cronus's divine power began to deplete rapidly. The wounds on his body continued to increase, and the operation of his harvest authority became sluggish due to the continuous interference. Finally, Arg! At the moment an attempt to forcibly reverse time was interfered with by Hestia's flame, Poseidon's heavy punch slammed hard into his chest, Hades's shadow blade simultaneously sliced across his ribs, and Hera's explosion magic also detonated behind his back. Cronus spat out a mouthful of golden divine blood, his figure staggering back violently, his handsome face twisted with pain and rage. He swept a venomous gaze over these 5 rebellious children, who had forced him into such a state, his eyes lingering especially on the faces of Poseidon and Hera, as if wanting to carve their likenesses into the depths of his soul. HMPH. You rebellious brats. You think this is over. I am Cronus, the king of time. Today's shame will surely be repaid 100-fold in the future. As Cronus left behind this roar filled with endless hatred, intense spatial temporal fluctuations erupted around his body, and he fled into the sky in a wretched state. With his escape, the suffocating pressure on the battlefield slowly dissipated, leaving only devastation in its wake. Half-destroyed palaces, cracked earth, clouds cleared by the aftermath of divine power, and the wounds on their bodies, especially those of Poseidon and Hades, who acted as the main attackers, whose wounds still bore the erosive aura of the reaping divine power, were slowly healing. Zeus and Métis both stood blankly in place, their eyes still lingering with the shock and bewilderment of having witnessed that world-shaking siege. Even the knowledgeable queen of the Titans, Rhea, could not help but open her mouth slightly as she watched the unimaginable power displayed by her 5 children, a complex and indecipherable look in her eyes. Victory, in a way that completely deviated from the original mythological trajectory, had been seized by these 5 siblings. In the original threads of fate, this should have been the critical juncture where Zeus, relying on wisdom and courage, led the defeat of Cronus and established the prestige of the new generation of leaders. But due to the chain reaction brought about by the anomaly that was Poseidon, he, along with his siblings, had become strong enough to force back a fully powered god-king with their own strength. Well, Zeus finally snapped out of his shock. He suppressed the stormy waves in his heart, preparing to proceed according to his previous plan. My brothers and sisters, your divine power is so formidable that I, as your younger brother, truly, feel greatly reassured. Now that the evil father has been repelled, his forces remain, and he will certainly not give up. We must gather our strength as soon as possible, unite our kin who aspire to resist tyranny, and prepare to welcome a full-scale war against the Titans. According to the plan he had with Métis and Rhea, the next step was naturally for him, the prophesied savior, and youngest brother, to lead the integration of forces and logically become the commander of the allied army. With his mother Rhea's support, the assistance of wisdom Métis, and Gaia's vague acknowledgement, Zeus believed that even if his brothers and sisters were powerful, they should naturally accept his leadership in the face of righteousness and family bonds. Oh, there is actually someone here even more ignorant of manners than Poseidon. You, the blonde one, regardless of who you are. By what right do you think we should listen to your orders and prepare for some war? The first to voice this challenge was, as expected, Hades. He had already wiped away a trace of blood from the corner of his mouth at some point, shrouding himself once more in a faint black mist, revealing only a pair of eyes colder than the abyss, silently watching Zeus. Hades was a god with an almost instinctive desire for insensitivity to status and power. Being humbled in front of his own family was one thing, but in front of outsiders, he would never allow any existence to tower over him, especially this younger brother, who had suddenly appeared with such an entitled attitude. Tisk, dragging me into this again. Poseidon picked at his ear, indifferent. But this guy's words, while crude, aren't wrong. War is definitely going to happen. The look in that old fool's eyes when he fled clearly showed he went to call for backup. The problem is, this lady, and our first time meeting, mother, seem very eager for our youngest brother to be the one giving the orders. Hera, for once, did not lose her temper. She simply crossed her arms, her crimson eyes glancing sideways at Zeus, then swept a look at Rhea and Métis beside him, saying coldly. But she deliberately emphasized the words, first time meeting, the alienation and sarcasm within which were self-evident. Hestia just smiled gently without responding. Demeter also maintained a quiet silence. However, Hera's restraint seemed more due to the divine power Rhea had just displayed, which was enough to withstand her own, as well as that awkward, mother-daughter, title, which forced her to barely hold back. And Hades was clearly at a similar breaking point, his expression under the black mist flickering between light and shadow. As for Poseidon, perhaps influenced by memories of his past life, he wasn't that obsessed with who was the boss, his attitude being closer to that of Hestia and Demeter. Wait and see, no rush to choose a side. Perhaps sensing the stiff atmosphere in the air, Rhea sighed inwardly and took the initiative to walk towards Hera and Hades, who were clearly in a standoff. To see you safe and sound, and even so powerful, as a mother, I am overjoyed. But catching up and discussing matters should perhaps be done in a safer place. Cronus has operated here for many years, his trusted guards could arrive at any moment. As the Queen of the Titans, Rhea fully displayed the tact of a mature politician. She knew very well that continuing to let Zeus argue with this pair of clearly unruly older siblings would only deepen the rift. Bringing everyone to the stronghold she and Zeus had prepared in advance would at least add some leverage to their side in terms of environment. Shortly after, through a spatial transfer spell cast by Rhea, the scene before them changed, and they appeared inside a huge tent. This was clearly the carefully arranged base camp of the Resistance Army, with divine power runes faintly flowing on the tent walls, isolating the inside from the outside. Many figures had already gathered inside the tent, their auras varying in strength, but most carried a spirit of resistance and nervous hope. Among them were not a few existences who had left their mark in mythology. The stern-faced goddess Styx, who held the oath of the river Styx, and her powerful sons beside her, the god of strength Kratos and the goddess of violence Gaia. Prometheus, radiating an aura of wisdom and prophecy, and his brother beside him, Epimetheus, who seemed to always be a beat slow, looking around with curious eyes. And the sun god Helios, surrounded by a scorching, bright aura, and the cool, moon-like goddess Selene. Welcome to our camp, it is safe here for the time being. Guided by Rhea, Poseidon and the others walked into the tent. The eyes of everyone inside turned toward them in unison. As if returning to his own home turf, Zeus's spine, which had been somewhat tense, straightened involuntarily, and his face regained a confident glow. He walked to the center of the tent, looked around at everyone, especially focusing his gaze on his 5 older siblings, and spoke. Fellow kin present here, this place gathers those with the ambition to resist the tyranny of Cronus. And I, Zeus, thanks to your trust, am temporarily holding the position of commander. My brothers and sisters, you have just escaped your cages, and perhaps you are not yet aware of the situation in the outside world. Many titans who have suffered under the oppression of Cronus, as well as the kind and great Earth Mother Gaia, have all recognized my qualifications to lead this righteous war. Back on his own turf, Zeus was indeed much more confident. But perhaps he had overlooked one thing, or rather, based on his past experiences, he had made an arrogant assumption. He actually thought that these words alone would be enough to make his powerful brothers and sisters submit. He clearly lacked a deep understanding of Hades's almost bone-deep desire for control, and Hera's arrogance and rebellion, which might not even yield to their mother's face. As for Poseidon, Demeter, and Hestia, they were by no means easy to manipulate either. Almost as soon as Zeus finished speaking, Demeter and Hestia quietly moved closer to Poseidon's sides. Poseidon, why do I feel like our little brother is a bit of a dimwit? After seeing the display Hades and Hera just put on, he still dares to speak in that, I'm the boss's tone. Demeter sent a transmission through divine power. Her voice sounded directly in Poseidon's mind, as gentle as ever, but the content made Poseidon's lip twitch. Hey, Demeter, isn't calling him a dimwit a bit much? After all, he's the brother who got us out. Hestia also sent a transmission, but her tone carried a clear sense of helplessness. Poseidon, you make the call, Demeter continued. Looking at the situation, a fight is probably inevitable. If it really comes to blows, should we stab our little brother first? Just like how you usually persuade Hades, quick and decisive. Hey, Hestia. Demeter. Poseidon couldn't help but complain through the transmission. What's gotten into you two? Aren't you the ones who usually stop me from fighting Hades? Why are you more aggressive than me now? Also, when have I ever persuaded Hades? It's clearly you who's always plotting against him from the shadows. I've never done anything like that. Poseidon was speechless at the warlike nature these two goddesses were currently displaying. In the original myths, these two were clearly gentle goddesses who looked at the big picture. Why was one suggesting, backstabbing Zeus, and the other tacitly agreeing and letting him decide? This script was all wrong. Logically, it should be Poseidon itching to cause trouble, only to be held back by Demeter and Hestia working together. How had it been reversed? While Poseidon's trio was secretly complaining as they watched the confrontation between Zeus, Hades, and Hera, where the air was practically sparking with tension, 2 figures proactively walked toward them. It was Prometheus, along with his younger brother, Epimetheus, whom he was gently pulling along. Prometheus was shrouded in a subtle, prophetic aura, while his brother gave off the impression of an innocent child with a simple mind who only lived for the moment. Greetings to the great God who commands the raging deep, shakes the foundations of the earth, and leads the eternal cycle of power. Prometheus bowed slightly, first paying his respects to Poseidon with words that were respectful yet seemed to carry a deeper meaning. Hello there. I'm Epimetheus, and this is my brother, Prometheus. Epimetheus greeted them with a grin, curiously sizing up Poseidon and the 2 goddesses beside him. Faced with this sudden greeting, Poseidon composed himself and nodded. Pleasure to meet you. I am Poseidon. He gestured to his side. These 2 are Demeter and Hestia. Prometheus turned his gaze toward the 2 goddesses and bowed with equal respect. It is an honor to meet the legitimate goddess who governs the growth of all things and the abundance of grain, and the goddess of the eternal hearth, who lights the divine realm and the mortal world, bringing warmth and order. His words were full of praise, faintly revealing a sense of certainty. Poseidon understood this underlying layer of flattery and hint. But Demeter and Hestia were clearly not impressed by this kind of flattery colored with divine definitions. "Ah, I don't quite understand what you're saying. I don't like the title of hearth either, it sounds too small-minded. My flames, if I so choose, are enough to incinerate the world's falsehoods and reshape order." Demeter frowned slightly, directly expressing her confusion. Hestia's reaction was even more direct. She shook her head slightly, a hint of disapproval appearing on her gentle face. Hearing this, Prometheus was not embarrassed. Instead, he teased them with a playful expression. "Ha ha ha, then I have misspoken. It seems the goddesses have been deeply influenced by the Lord of the Sea. Your temperaments are so bold and hardy that you possess the spirit of bold heroines, which was quite beyond my expectations." As he spoke, his gaze swept over Poseidon as if unintentionally. "What did you say?" Hearing this, the expressions of Demeter and Hestia changed simultaneously. The term, bold heroines, sounded like a compliment, but combined with Prometheus's teasing tone, it sounded exactly like he was saying they were not elegant or gentle enough. And the two of them hated it most when people said they were like manly women, or not like a goddess. Poseidon knew all too well that once the fury of these two sisters was ignited, the consequences were definitely harder to deal with than Hera's magical bombardments. He remembered one time when he had been loose-lipped and accidentally commented that Hestia was getting more and more of a big sister boss vibe. As a result, the seemingly gentle Hestia had, accidentally, singed him with her sacred fire for 3 days, leaving his divine body smelling of burnt smoke. Ahem. Poseidon quickly stepped forward, blocking the space between Prometheus and the two goddesses, and forcibly changed the subject. "So, the two of you didn't come over just to praise us, did you? The main show is about to start over there, aren't you going to join in?" He pointed toward the center of the camp, where the atmosphere around the trio of Zeus, Hera, and Hades was becoming increasingly heavy. Prometheus restrained his smile, placed his hand on the head of his brother Epimetheus, who seemed to want to say something more, and said seriously to Poseidon, "I only wished to come and establish a good rapport with the future master of the sea. After all, the depths are as a raging ocean, fickle and unpredictable. Even I, named Foresight, cannot fully peer through every wave of its future. If in the future, when the great God has the strength to look after the mortal world, you could spare a hand to protect this simple-minded brother of mine, I would be eternally grateful." After saying this, he pressed down on the confused Epimetheus to give a bow, then said no more, turning back to their original position as if he really had just come to show his face and get acquainted. If Poseidon didn't have the memories of a transmigrator and didn't know Prometheus's famous future fate of stealing fire for man, as well as the story of his trouble-making brother Epimetheus and Pandora's box, he probably would have found this fellow truly bizarre. Is he hinting at the future regarding Pandora, or even his theft of fire? Could he have already sensed his future calamity and is paving the way for his brother in advance? Poseidon watched Prometheus's back, his eyes narrowing slightly. Demeter and Hestia completely failed to understand this conversation that was practically a riddle. Although they were still a bit huffy over the bold heroines comment, they were also confused by Prometheus's nonsensical request, tilting their heads in wonder. Poseidon withdrew his gaze and temporarily put Prometheus's overture out of his mind. Obsessing over things that hadn't happened yet wasn't his style. That was the kind of dead end that Zeus, Hera, Hades, or the prophet before him loved to crawl into. As far as Poseidon was concerned, whatever. I'll leave future troubles for the future me to worry about. After Prometheus left, Poseidon had barely settled down when a fire officially ignited between Hera and Hades. Oh my. Poseidon, look quickly. Are Hera and Hades really getting serious now? Demeter lightly poked Poseidon's sturdy arm with her fingertip. Poseidon looked in the direction she pointed and saw that in the center of the encampment, the divine power of Hera, Hades, and Zeus was clashing wildly and surging incessantly. Hera's crimson hair danced wildly without wind, like a crown of burning flames. She was surrounded by a scorching and dangerous aura of spellcraft, her red eyes fixed on Zeus, making no effort to conceal her contempt and provocation. In the shadows slightly behind her, Hades' figure was half hidden. Dense, dark divine power flowed and churned around him like a living thing, emitting a bone-chilling coldness that created a stark and eerie contrast with Hera's blazing heat, both pressing down upon Zeus. Zeus, at the center of the storm, had a tense expression, his handsome face no longer held any of his previous composure. His golden short hair stood on end, and strands of lightning jumped and flickered uncontrollably between them. Clenching his fists, he tried his best to channel the still unrefined divine power of the King of Gods within him, joining forces with Mate beside him to barely withstand the terrifying pressure from his older siblings. Beside Zeus, the red-haired, graceful goddess Metis was assisting him with undivided attention. Her beautiful face was grave, and her slender white fingers quickly traced wisdom runes of enhancement and protection in the air, attempting to compensate for Zeus' lack of divine foundation. Further out, Rhea was watching this scene anxiously. Several times she wanted to step forward to intervene, but seemed weighed down by concerns, and could only stamp her feet in frustration. As for the other Titans and Zeus' early followers in the tent, they looked excited, as if they were enjoying the chaos. Helios the sun god watched with arms crossed, a playful smile on his face. Selene the moon goddess frowned slightly, seemingly displeased by the tense atmosphere. Kratos, the god of strength, and Gaia, the goddess of violence, had excited expressions, as if they were watching a long-awaited show. Many more deities watched this sudden family infighting with curiosity, tension, or indifference. Seeing this, Poseidon shook his head helplessly, but he did not intend to intervene immediately. In his view, with a great war imminent, the position of leader did indeed need to be clarified. From a rational and original work perspective, letting Zeus be the leader was perhaps the most logical conclusion. But the problem was Hades' desire for the pinnacle of power, as well as Hera's innate pride. She would never willingly bow to anyone, especially someone she didn't quite like, destined that they would never easily bow their heads to this youngest brother. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that Hera and Hades were currently slightly superior to Zeus, who had just left his newbie protection period, both in terms of divine power intensity and their understanding of their own authority. Of course, in terms of the greatest combat power here in a one-on-one, Poseidon considered himself second to none. But he felt there was nothing to boast about, and it had no real practical significance. After all, it was Rhea who had gathered everyone here, and she had long since decided that the future leader would be Zeus. Rhea, oh Rhea, your favoritism has brought quite a lot of trouble to this youngest brother, Poseidon mused to himself. Just as Poseidon expected, Rhea was filled with conflict and anxiety. She was indeed single-mindedly trying to support Zeus to become the next king of gods. Whether it was the prophecy of the seer Prometheus, the obscure revelations passed on by the daughters of Oceanus, the river that circles the world, or the unquestionable will of the Earth Mother Gaia, they all clearly pointed to the same future. The one who would ultimately defeat Cronus and lead the new era would undoubtedly be Zeus. This was the established destiny, the inevitable picture woven by many prophecies. But what stood between prophecy and reality at this moment was a huge variable that no prophecy had foreseen. Poseidon, this anomaly who possessed memories of a past life, had forged himself in an unimaginable way while inside the stomach of Cronus, and had invisibly driven the abnormal expansion of all his siblings' strength. Perhaps the prophecy itself was not wrong, it is just that my child, Poseidon, has become the greatest variable. Rhea's gaze involuntarily drifted toward the sea-blue figure in the distance who looked completely unconcerned. From the very first moment she saw Poseidon, Rhea's keen intuition as a queen of gods and a mother had told her. This child had received the ultimate favor of the ocean. That was not just control over water and waves, but a more essential, more fundamental connection. He seemed to be the embodiment of the sea's fickle, deep, violent, and gentle will. That affection from the primordial ocean, in its intensity and purity, might even surpass that of Oceanus, the titan who ruled the primordial currents. With a child like this, who is deeply loved by all the seas and is himself so uninhibited and free-spirited, how could the river of destiny not ripple? The boundless sea ruled by Oceanus is inherently the most unpredictable and difficult place to prophesy in the world. Even that clever child Prometheus must have sensed the uncertainty in Poseidon, which is why he went out of his way to show goodwill. Ray's thoughts raced, and her heart grew more anxious. Zeus, Hades, and Hera were all her flesh and blood. Emotionally, she could not truly favor any one of them. But starting from the prophecy, from the big picture, and from her plan with Gaia, Zeus had to become the core. However, if she continued to let these three proud children confront each other here, this newly formed anti-Cronus alliance would inevitably fall apart. What should I do? If only I could get clear guidance from Lady Gaia right now. Just as Rhea was anxious and almost about to intervene regardless of the consequences, the standoff in the field had upgraded from a simple contest of divine power to verbal abuse, and it looked like they were about to come to blows. And the surrounding titans not only did not dissuade them, but excitedly cleared the space. Enough. Hera, Hades, do you intend to turn your weapons against your own brother at this moment, when the enemy could attack at any time? Zeus' voice sounded somewhat hoarse due to anger and pressure. Hey, brother. A brother who needs his mother and a woman to protect him, yet delusionally thinks he can stand above us and issue orders. If you cannot even pass this test of ours, what right do you have to face Cronus, or those titans who are eyeing us like tigers? What Hera says, though unpleasant to hear, has its logic. The position of leader concerns the survival of the gods, it cannot be decided as child's play. You still need to prove you have the capacity to bear this position. Hera's sneer and Hades' voice came almost simultaneously. Seeing the conflict on the verge of breaking out, Rhea broke into a cold sweat, not knowing how to effectively persuade these three equally stubborn children. Just at this critical moment, Gaia's voice suddenly rang in her ears. My dear daughter Rhea, do not worry too much. Go and persuade your child Poseidon. Perhaps he is the only one who can untangle this current dilemma. It's Gaia, the voice of the Earth Mother. Ray's spirits lifted, and she hurriedly replied in her heart, Lady Gaia. But Poseidon, he seems to have no intention of getting involved in this matter. It does not matter. He is a child favored by the sea, one that even I cannot sway. His choices and his will may themselves become the fulcrum that changes the prophecy. Go and ask him, the scales of victory may tilt in unexpected ways due to his inclination. Gaia's voice faded away as quietly as it had arrived. I understand, Lady Gaia. Rhea felt as if she had found a treasure. She suddenly had a direction in her heart and immediately ran towards Poseidon. As she got closer, Rhea could more clearly feel the unique, oceanic charm emanating from Poseidon. Fresh, free, profound, and hiding incomparable, majestic power. That aura was purer and richer than any she had felt from other sea deities, as if standing before her was not a newborn god, but a walking ocean possessing its own will. This child is destined to become the true master of all waters, the king of all seas. Rhea suppressed this shock, assumed the posture of a loving mother, and spoke in a calm tone. Poseidon, my child, I know that as a mother, I have never given you the grace of upbringing, nor have I been able to protect you when you needed it most. Now that we have just met, I come to you as a mother to make a request, which may make you feel unhappy. Sincere worry welled up in her emerald eyes. But mother still begs you, go and persuade your brothers and sister. You know better than anyone that at such a moment, such infighting is meaningless. The threat of Cronus is imminent, and his army could descend at any time. We must unite all our strength and face the outside world together. Poseidon took one look at Ray's hesitant expression, and his heart was clear as a mirror. Sure enough, she came looking for him. Honestly, he felt it was incredibly troublesome to get involved in this. Once involved, with Hera's temper, he would inevitably be complained about. That gloomy guy Hades might calculate against him behind his back. As for Zeus, although he wasn't sure exactly what the personality of this world's Zeus was like, if he inherited the petty and vengeful attributes from the original myth, he would also be a potential trouble. Poseidon's disdain was almost entirely written on his face, his brows furrowed into a knot. Seeing this, Rhea became even more anxious, the plea in her eyes almost turning into substance. Hestia, seeing Rhea in such a difficult position, although she was still calculating how to find an opportunity to stab that less than likable golden-haired younger brother later, was not a cold-blooded person who could turn a blind eye to her birth mother's pleas, so she helped. Poseidon, mother is right. If necessary, I will go talk to Hera. She is at least willing to listen to some of what I say. Demeter also crossed her arms and echoed. Since Hestia has spoken, leave Hades to me. You know, dealing with that stubborn and pretentious younger brother is easy for me. She even leaned in a little, lowered her voice, and said something shocking in a gentle tone. Besides, if we really can't talk it out, let's just figure out a way to knock Hades and Zeus out from behind. As for Hera, we can actually sit down and negotiate conditions. She's actually quite easy to talk to, as long as you stroke her for the right way. Listening to Demeter's simple and crude solution, and looking at Rhea, who was stunned by these words, Poseidon let out a long sigh. Sigh, my good sisters, please spare me. Just think about that kind of thing. I haven't planned to do it yet. You're not doing it. Poseidon patted Demeter's shoulder helplessly as he said this, and Demeter blinked, a trace of disappointment actually appearing on her face. He quickly held down Hestia, who was secretly rubbing up some sacred fire nearby. It wasn't that he wanted to help Zeus, he just saw that Demeter and Hestia seemed very eager to help Rhea smooth things over in some way. Of course, he also saw through the fact that these two sisters probably wanted to use the excuse of helping to mediate, to actually persuade Hera and Hades to move away, so they could continue playing that big sister game formed in the darkness of the womb. Sigh, in that case, I'll go try. But I have one condition. You say it, child. As long as mother can do it. Rhea was overjoyed to hear this and nodded quickly. In my opinion, that brat Zeus is very petty. It's easy to beat him up, but it will be troublesome if he holds a grudge and keeps pestering me. You have to be responsible for stopping this. Poseidon spread his hands, with an expression of, I am very afraid of trouble. Okay. Mother promises you. I will never let Zeus bother you because of this. Rhea nodded immediately. As long as Poseidon was willing to come forward to mediate, she and Métis would definitely have a way to stabilize Zeus and not let him harass Poseidon. Moreover, in her view, Zeus was not an unreasonable person by nature. Seeing Rhea agree so readily, Poseidon stopped stalling, casually smoothed the unruly sea blue bangs on his forehead, stretched his long legs, and walked straight to the center of the conflict where divine power was surging. Hey, I said, have you played enough? Poseidon's lazy voice interjected, carrying a casualness that was out of place with the tense atmosphere of the scene. He walked straight between Hera, Hades, and Zeus, hands in his pockets, looking left and right. We are gods, after all, not street hooligans. Making such a fuss over deciding a leader, aren't you afraid of being laughed at by those titans who are still watching from the sidelines? Where did this idiot come from? Is there any place for you to interrupt here? Although I don't know what exactly a street hooligan refers to, but Poseidon, you come here now, could it be that you also want to share a piece of this leadership position? Facing Hades and Hera's unceremonious, prickly words, Poseidon waved his hand impatiently. Hades, when have you ever seen me love to meddle in such nosy business? I have always pursued freedom. This kind of position that requires both effort and labor is only rare to people with a rigid personality like yours. That is true. You have been like this since you were in Cronus's stomach. However, when you gave me a nickname back then, I didn't see you pursuing freedom so much. Hades said. Enough, little Poseidon, go and stay to the side obediently. Your big sisters will handle this kind of trouble. Poseidon scoffed at Hera's pretense of maturity, he knew her all too well. Hera, you're a smart person, don't let your pride blind you. Even if you use brute force to suppress Hades today and force Zeus to bow his head, what then? He pointed at the Titans and followers around them, each with different expressions. Look, that golden-haired little brother is the one chosen from the start, and Rhea supports him. That red-haired Métis beside him is clearly an expert strategist and won't leave him. Many of the gods here originally came for Rhea and the Zeus of the prophecy. If you force your way to the top today without a proper title or justification, will these people truly be convinced? When internal undercurrents surge and Cronus watches from outside like a tiger stalking its prey, how will we fight this war? How could Hera not understand this logic? It was just that her bone-deep pride made her look down on this golden-haired younger brother who had suddenly appeared looking like he was destined by heaven. In her view, the other siblings could be equals, but Zeus alone, she instinctively resisted him being above her. Feeling Hera's anger and Poseidon's assessment of Zeus, Hades also erupted with a surge of cold divine power, heading straight for Poseidon. Poseidon, what exactly do you mean by those words? Are you suggesting we bow our heads to this child? Poseidon remained calm and composed, a layer of azure water light naturally rippling around him, easily neutralizing Hades' pressure. Let me finish. You two are even more impatient than I am. His gaze swept over Hera and Hades, then glanced at Zeus, whose expression had softened slightly but remained tense, and proposed his idea. My point is, since no one is willing to submit to anyone else right now, forcibly appointing a leader will only plant the seeds of greater disaster. Why not try another way? He raised his voice, ensuring that most of the deities in the tent could hear clearly. Using this camp as a base, we radiate outwards. We siblings, including Zeus, will each use our own abilities to win over and recruit those Titan gods and other forces who are still on the fence or have already decided to rebel against Cronus. Whether by displaying force, explaining the pros and cons, or bestowing favors, the means are unlimited. In the end, whoever gathers the strongest faction, commands the most robust military force, and gains the widest support. Poseidon spread his hands, making a "that's how it is" gesture. Then that person shall be the undisputed leader of our alliance. How about it? As soon as these words were spoken, a low murmur of discussion immediately rose within the tent. Hades and Hera fell into a brief contemplation. This method sounded decent. It could avoid a complete fallout and a fight to the death right now, while also legitimately demonstrating their own strength and expanding their influence. Although Zeus currently held the advantage of the prophetic prediction and mother's support, just as Poseidon said, even if they suppressed Zeus with brute force now, it wouldn't change the fact that many deities had gathered specifically for Rhea and Zeus. It would be better to take this opportunity to compete openly and fairly. When it came to recruiting factions and demonstrating power, Hades didn't believe he would lose. Hera was equally confident in herself. Just as the two exchanged glances, clearly somewhat moved, Zeus, who had been silently enduring the pressure, grew anxious. To him, this proposal was like pulling the rug out from under his feet. Originally, with the prophecy, his mother's support, and early followers, he had a clear advantage and victory was almost certain. But now, these two siblings who had suddenly appeared were also entering the competition. His advantage was instantly leveled or even potentially overtaken. This is not right. Brother's proposal seems fair, but in reality, it's unfair to me. Zeus. Before he could finish his sentence, Métis beside him quickly intervened and stopped him. Métis, what are you doing? This is clearly my elder siblings joining forces to push me out, it's so unfair. Zeus looked at his most trusted partner and advisor with confusion and anger. Métis did not let go. Instead, she hugged the indignant Zeus tightly, patting his back to soothe him, then turned to look at Poseidon. Eldest brother, do you mean that all of Zeus's siblings, including yourself, will participate in this competition? Poseidon rubbed his chin, and although he found it a bit troublesome, he still nodded. Although I'm not personally that interested, that's roughly what I mean. If we're going to play, everyone should play together, so no one can gossip. Fine. Then we agree to this proposal. What? Métis? Métis nodded without hesitation. Zeus could hardly believe his ears. He tried to break free from Métis' embrace, but she held him even tighter. Shish, Zeus, trust me. This is to our advantage. Rather than saying this is pushing us out, it's more like Poseidon has given us a legitimate opportunity. With that, she gave Zeus no further chance to object in public, nodded once more to Poseidon, Hera, and Hades, and then half-pulled, half-dragged the bewildered Zeus away from the center of the conflict. As soon as they entered a relatively private space, Métis set up a soundproofing and cloaking barrier, then forcefully pressed the still sulking Zeus down onto the bed. Zeus, don't be so quick to get angry. Use that head of yours, blessed by thunder, to think carefully. You've seen the strength of your two siblings with your own eyes, they are by no means inferior to you, right? Métis knelt before him, looking up at him, her red hair cascading down like a waterfall, her eyes shimmering with the light of wisdom. Zeus opened his mouth, though his pride made him reluctant to admit it, the facts were plain. He could only give a muffled, So, even if Lady Rhea and some of the Titans support you because of the prophecy, once a conflict truly breaks out with Hades and Hera, regardless of the outcome, this newly formed alliance will inevitably become unstable or even split. The Titan race worshipped strength and results. Your father Cronus back then only gained recognition by using real strength to exile Uranus. In this kind of internal friction, are you absolutely certain you can overwhelmingly defeat them? Zeus fell silent. He wasn't certain. Hades' unpredictable trickery and the violent yet exquisite nature of Hera's spells had both left a deep impression on him. Not to mention Poseidon, that monster who was clearly even stronger and had an ambiguous attitude, as well as his other two sisters who seemed gentle but were actually not to be trifled with. No. I indeed don't have full certainty. Zeus had to admit this, his fists clenching slightly. Métis took his hand, her voice becoming even softer. That's right. Once a conflict erupts, no matter the result, the trust and prestige you've worked so hard to build will be damaged. But if we follow Poseidon's proposal, the situation is completely different. This seems like a competition, but it's actually a game of demonstration and integration. By proving your ability through recruiting various factions, you can legitimately tie all the forces, including your siblings, into a single rope. Listening to Métis' analysis, Zeus's furrowed brows gradually relaxed, and the anger in his eyes was replaced by contemplation. Indeed, when it came to winning people over and building factions, he was confident he wouldn't lose to anyone. Hades was gloomy and reclusive, Hera was proud and easily angered, Poseidon was casual and hated trouble, and Demeter and Hestia seemed to have little interest in power. As long as he could demonstrate the strongest integrative ability and gather the largest faction in this competition, the position of leader would naturally be as stable as Mount Tai. Moreover, if he could take this opportunity to truly win over these powerful siblings, his strength would undergo a qualitative leap. You're right, Métis. I was too hasty and didn't see the key to the matter. This is indeed to my advantage. Furthermore, even brother Hades and sister Hera, who oppose me at every turn, will have nothing to say about this and can only rely on their own abilities. Zeus let out a long breath, taking Métis' soft hand in his, a confident smile returning to his face. That's it. It seems your wisdom, which was blinded by anger, has finally begun to shine again, my dear Zeus. Métis gave a mischievous smile, one that was bright and moving. Métis, my wisdom is always online, okay. I was just confused by anger earlier. Zeus couldn't help but protest. He looked at Métis kneeling before him, her eyes filled with his reflection, her face where wisdom and beauty coexisted, her cheeks slightly flushed from her urgent persuasion just now, and her lips so close, emitting an alluring fragrance. His Adam's apple bobbed. As usual, for him, the best way to vent pressure, celebrate victory, or express joy was none other than this. He took the opportunity to push Métis, who was in his arms, down onto the couch. Ah! Soon, the sounds hidden under the soundproofing barrier echoed throughout the night in a corner of the tent. After Poseidon's proposal was adopted, time flowed quietly for a week. Just as many gods had privately predicted, in the initial tally of influence, the one who received the highest support was still Zeus. The halo of prophecy, the tireless support of his mother Rhea, the meticulous assistance of the goddess of wisdom, Métis, and his own increasingly dazzling thunderous prestige on the battlefield together wove a seemingly indestructible web of support for him. However, following closely behind was not Hades or Poseidon, whom the gods originally thought would be the eldest or the strongest in combat, but the flame-haired, radiant, and hot-tempered goddess Hera. This was somewhat unexpected, but upon reflection, it was within the realm of reason. Among Hera's supporters, goddesses made up the vast majority. Iris, the goddess in charge of rainbows and messengers, had already become her most capable confidant and spokesperson, like an extension of her wings and voice. In the original trajectory of fate, Iris was Hera's loyal messenger, the closeness now was merely an inevitable fulfillment ahead of schedule. Adding in the two sisters Demeter and Hestia, whose strength and status were not to be underestimated, the Zeus camp felt even more pressure. Demeter's divine power of abundance could stabilize the rear and provide endless supplies. Hestia's eternal sacred fire symbolized the core of order and cohesion. With the three goddesses joining forces, they were not only equal in high-end combat power but also constructed a barrier at the grassroots and order levels of the divine realm that Zeus could not easily shake. In the Titan world, which revered strength and results, it was often those goddesses who possessed wisdom, charm, and power simultaneously who constrained or even dominated the authority of the male gods. What Hera was showing now was precisely this daunting potential and momentum. Her power, like the fire in her hair, was burning at a terrifying speed. Next came Hades. Just like his innate gloomy temperament and his name being synonymous with authority, those attracted and gathered under his command were mostly existences that made ordinary gods feel uncomfortable or even fearful. The cold breath of Thanatos, the god of death, which brought ultimate tranquility, and the subtle divine power of Eris, the goddess of discord, which incited strife and chaos, both resonated strongly with the dark side of the underworld, death, and wealth represented by Hades. Although Thanatos and Eris, as children of the ancient night goddess Nyx, could not be considered fully surrendered to Hades, the tacit understanding of being, kindred spirits, had already formed the prototype of a fearsome alliance. Finally, there was Poseidon's faction. Rather than a faction, it was more like a casual blank space. He had almost never actively recruited any subordinates. On one hand, it was due to his free and easy nature. He felt that forming cliques and managing a faction was a genuine hassle. On the other hand, since he awakened his essence as the sea god, a profound realization had been branded deep within his soul. When he could clearly perceive all the flowing water in the world, rivers, lakes, and seas, and even the most essential moisture in the bloodlines of life, when he could perceive the vibrations of the earth and the mysterious response to his call, when everything obeyed his yet to be fully formed but already boundless will. Taking in those trivial subordinate gods and managing a superficial faction really seemed to become a redundant and boring matter. Water has no constant flow, and water has no constant shape. The ocean itself was his most vast and boundless territory and source of power. However, if one had to list a few gods with close ties and famous names for Poseidon, they would be Styx, the goddess of the river of oaths, and her daughter, Nike, the goddess of victory. Furthermore, the goddess of wisdom, Métis, this daughter of Oceanus and Zeus's public partner and advisor, was plotting something unknown, as her stance also subtly leaned toward Poseidon. At least, she could be considered to have half a foot on this side. And this complex interpersonal network gradually revealed its influence in the all-out war that subsequently broke out. In this way, under Zeus's nominal command, a grand war that swept across heaven and earth and decided the ownership of the new era began. But that war soon fell into an agonizing stalemate. Gods do not die, this is one of the underlying rules of the world. Even if their divine power is scattered, their divine bodies severely wounded, and their divine souls temporarily sealed, as long as their divine names and authorities have not been completely stripped or replaced, there will eventually be a day of return. This turned the war into a long-lasting consumption and a repeated tug-of-war. 10 years of time seemed like a blink of an eye on the scale of a divine war, yet it had already left the originally fertile earth riddled with holes. For Zeus, charge, defend the glory of his majesty Cronus. Crush these rebel gods. On the battlefield, the shouts of killing and the roar of divine power collisions, the wails of the dying, and the roars of resentment intertwined into a piece of eternal background noise. And those who clashed most intensely with Cronus and his Titan generals, with the most thrilling combat situations, were naturally the three: Zeus, Hera, and Hades. Because they had fought Cronus so many times and their power levels were the closest, a high-intensity combat space belonging to them naturally formed on the vast battlefield. Violent thunder, world-incinerating flames, reaping scythe shadows, sinister undercurrents, and those eerie ripples controlling time raged wildly in this area. Bang, bang, boom. HMPH, not having seen you for 10 years, you brats have become quite a bit more durable than when you first came out of my belly. Cronus swung his scythe, brushing aside a blazing lightning spear thrown by Zeus. The time ripples caused the lightning spear's speed to eerily slow down at the last moment, and he easily dodged it. That's because you're too old, you old antique. The times have changed, it's time to roll off the throne and go lie in the dust of history. Hades's figure stabbed out from the shadow behind Cronus, a short dagger condensed from death carrying a soul-freezing chill, aimed straight for the groin. You unfilial son, Hades. Cronus turned back in shock and anger to parry, the scythe and the black dagger colliding and sending up a trail of black smoke. Hades, you're using those weird words you heard from Poseidon again. Honestly, you have no grace at all when you fight. Hera's voice came from high above. She was suspended in the flames, her red hair flying. With a wave of her hands, dozens of overlapping explosive magic circles instantly appeared around Cronus. Rumble. Ha ha ha. Old antique, that word sounds energetic. Hera, you're just jealous of my talent for language. Poseidon's loud laughter would occasionally drift in from other areas of the battlefield. Although he didn't often join this top-tier combat circle, he was clearly paying attention to the movements here at all times. The battle with Cronus was different from the one-sidedness at the beginning of the war, it had now become increasingly balanced. This was partly because Cronus had begun to respond with his true power, and partly due to Zeus's rapid growth amidst the decade of blood and fire. The thunder authority belonging to the God King within him was accelerating its awakening and fusion. Although not yet fully mastered, its power already rivaled, and at certain moments, could briefly suppress, Hades and Hera. Lord Poseidon, do you not plan to intervene in that battlefield? A cold and slightly raspy female voice sounded beside Poseidon. The goddess of the river Styx, had approached him at some unknown moment. She wore a long dress as deep as the night, its hem resembling flowing dark water. Her face was dignified and solemn, carrying the inviolable aura unique to oaths. But when her gaze fell upon Poseidon, it revealed a hint of softness that never appeared when she was with other deities. Ah, Styx, I have no ambition for the limelight. Besides, in my view, this war is destined to be a long one. It's not worth exhausting my strength in a head-on clash with that old man right now. Poseidon punched a charging Titan general, sending him flying backward and collapsing half a mountain peak, before brushing non-existent dust off his hands. This had almost become Poseidon's fixed pattern on the battlefield. He would appear at the front lines where a breakthrough was most needed or where the pressure was greatest, crushing or pinning down opponents with absolute strength, yet he always hovered on the fringes of the final kill and the ultimate confrontation. And goddess Styx, the ancient goddess renowned for her authority over oaths and the river Styx, often appeared by his side. Sometimes providing him with battlefield intelligence, sometimes assisting with her divine power, but more often than not, simply accompanying him in silence. Later, this gradually evolved into a unique symbol for Poseidon. He was the male god whom even the river goddess in charge of sacred oaths was willing to accompany and submit to. Styx, do you not care about the gossip and rumors on the battlefield? Poseidon suddenly asked one time. The rumors said that the cold and proud goddess Styx had become Poseidon's personal plaything. Hee, Lord Poseidon, there is no need to be troubled by such pointless noise. I have lived long enough to witness much rise and fall, as well as betrayal. Rumors are like the wind, they dissipate once they blow past. They cannot shake the foundation of the river Styx, nor can they tarnish the essence of oaths. With a smile on her lips that bloomed only for a certain god, she looked into his deep blue eyes, which seemed to hold the secrets of the entire ocean, and said softly, "As long as you can keep your promise to me and continue to protect my sister Asia's stubborn husband and impulsive sons, I shall be eternally grateful. In comparison, what does a little loss of reputation matter?" Poseidon stroked his chin. To him, such rumors weren't a bad thing, they could even save him a lot of trouble. However, he knew in his heart that these rumors ultimately damaged Styx's dignity and prestige as a goddess, which made him feel somewhat apologetic. Of course, the root of all this was nothing more than a mutually beneficial transaction between him and Styx. You look after my infatuated sister Asia's husband, Iapetus, and her two reckless sons, Menœtius and Atlas, allowing them to survive and retreat safely despite participating in the war. Styx's voice carried a trace of an imperceptible sigh. Though there is no room for sentiment on the battlefield, whenever I see my sister Asia weeping silently out of worry for her husband and sons, how can I, as her elder sister, just stand by and do nothing? At this moment, as if to confirm Styx's words, a figure so massive it was filled with violent power came roaring toward Poseidon. It was none other than the sky-bearing Titan, Atlas. "Poseidon, you again. If you have the guts, fight me head-on to the death. Stop dodging and hiding." Atlas's voice was like a landslide. He swung arms capable of hoisting the heavens, and every step he took made the earth tremble. "Could you shout a bit more quietly? You're so noisy every time we meet, my ears are about to start hallucinating from the vibration." Poseidon picked his ear, looking disgusted. "You fool! How dare you look down on me?" Atlas was enraged, his giant fist smashing down with the force to shatter mountains and split seas. Bang! Fists collided. A terrifying roar and a visible shockwave instantly exploded in a sphere, clearing and blowing away all debris and even unlucky low-level mythical monsters within hundreds of meters. A look of pain and disbelief appeared on Atlas's face. His titan body, strong enough to withstand divine artifacts, was actually being suppressed and forced back step by Poseidon's fist, which was wrapped in deep blue flowing light. "Your strength has increased a bit, but it's still too weak. Go back and train for another few hundred years, kid," Poseidon commented, then slightly released his divine power. Arg! Atlas felt an irresistible force penetrate his body. His massive frame flew backward uncontrollably, crashing into a distant cliffside with a boom as dust billowed into the sky. Tisk, those manga ideas from my past life are actually quite useful sometimes. Poseidon shook his wrist. That punch just now wasn't simple brute force. It was a prototype technique he had been developing over the past 10 years, combining it with the nascent form of his Sea King authority. Imitating those exaggerated settings from his memory, he tried to use his own divine authority as the core and the world as the body to induce, push, and even rotate the water veins and echoes of force contained in the surrounding world, magnifying the power of his attacks exponentially. He called it flow field rotation. He hadn't been idle during these 10 years. Besides dealing with the war, he had used Gaia's power to create a peculiar object called the Pillar of Heaven, undergoing near-masochistic hellish training to constantly temper his divine body and deepen his understanding of his authority. Atlas and Menoetius, who should have been incredibly powerful in mythology, truly seemed inadequate before the current Poseidon, who was extremely close to the source of his divine name and possessed a unique power system. And Poseidon was happy for it to be so. Having promised Styx, he pretended to be specifically responsible for pinning down Iapetus and his 2 sons. Every time they clashed, he merely knocked them away harmlessly. Though it looked intense, he was actually controlling his strength. If he truly intended to kill, with his current control over power, he could completely disable their combat capabilities or even leave them in a state of wishing for death without alerting too many people. But he kept his promise. The war between the alliance of new generation deities led by Zeus and the Titan race led by Cronus continued for a full 10 years. The flames of war spread, mountains and rivers were shattered, countless lives were lost, and even the divine realm itself appeared weary and scarred. Zeus stood on a high platform, looking at the gods below whose morale hadn't collapsed but whose exhaustion was hard to hide, his brow furrowed. By now, he had concluded that they could no longer delay indefinitely. A war of attrition benefited no one, especially their side, as their foundation was ultimately not as deep as that of the Titan race, which had ruled the world for many years. Prometheus. Zeus summoned the Titan renowned for his wisdom and foresight. Can you prophesy a way to end this long war? Continuing to fight benefits no one. Prometheus looked at the exhaustion in Zeus's eyes and the growing kingly majesty surrounding him, and pondered for a moment. He walked to an open map and pointed to a location. Regarding the final victory of this war, there is actually an existence who knows better than I. She knows all the secrets and powers buried deep beneath the earth. Go here, Zeus. Lead your most trusted brothers to meet the great, radiant Mother Earth, Gaia, who nurtures all and knows all. She will give you the guidance you need. Hearing this, Zeus was first taken aback, then suddenly realized, his eyes bursting with brilliance. Gaia. Yes, how could I have forgotten her? This war originated from her will and prophecy. Soon, Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon quietly left the main battlefield and embarked on a journey to find Gaia. As the commander second only to Zeus, Hera had to stay behind to hold the fort, stabilizing the front lines alongside Hestia and Demeter to defend against any potential counterattacks from Cronus. The 3 evaded the eyes and ears of the Titans and with difficulty reached the temple of Gaia at the bottom of the Omphalos pit, the navel of the world. It was silent and ancient here, filled with the most primitive aura of the earth, as if time had frozen. O great Mother Earth, the source of all things, Gaia. As the representative, Zeus respectfully bowed to the simple yet life-filled stone statue in the center of the temple. Please guide us who have lost our way, and grant us the method to end this pointless conflict and bring a new order to the world. As if responding to his call, the floor of the temple vibrated slightly, and a tender green sprout broke through the hard stone ground, growing frantically at a speed visible to the naked eye. Sprouting branches, unfurling leaves, growing larger. In the blink of an eye, a towering giant tree stood in the temple, exuding a majestic aura of life. Then, the silhouette of the giant tree changed softly, transforming into the image of a woman. She was not a physical entity, but rather an incarnation condensed from pure life force, the will of the earth, and ancient knowledge. Her features were blurred but carried the majesty and compassion of the mother goddess. It was the manifestation of Gaia's will. Go search, my children, search for those who, though of Titan blood, are not part of the Titan mainstream, and who harbor the strongest anger and hatred toward the current king of gods, Cronus. That ethereal yet deep voice echoed directly in the depths of the 3 gods' souls. Only by obtaining their assistance and breaking the old balance of power can this long-lasting war come to an end. Hearing this, the 3 gods looked at each other and understood instantly. The rumors that Cronus, out of wariness and fear, had imprisoned 3 hecatoncheires and 3 cyclops in the lowest depths of the abyss. Tartarus were no longer a secret during the 10-year war. Even some of the more enlightened Titan gods who followed them had suggested releasing these powerful ancient giants to join the war. But Tartarus was the deepest hell where the Titans were imprisoned and heaven and earth were separated, and it was by no means something that ordinary power could easily open. Furthermore, Cronus's defense of this place was extremely tight, so the proposal ultimately came to nothing. It seems the finale of the war will ultimately be decided in Tartarus. Zeus, the problem is that Cronus's defense of the entrance to Tartarus must be extremely tight. A direct assault would likely immediately draw their encirclement. Zeus said in a low voice. Hades, with the combined power of the 3 of us, plus the element of surprise, breaking through the defense is not impossible. Foolish. Once Cronus realizes the 3 of us have left the main battlefield simultaneously, he will undoubtedly launch a general offensive without hesitation. No matter how strong Hera and the others are, how long can they hold out against the full force of the Titan army? We must act quickly and finish our objective and return before Cronus can react. Hades retorted bluntly. You think I didn't think of that? Zeus smiled confidently. So before we set off, we must bring the finest ambrosia and nectar that has been stored for years. As long as we can successfully rescue those giants and let them immediately regain their strength to become our immediate combat force, this surprise attack can end the war in one stroke. On the way to Tartarus, Hades and Zeus once again began to argue over the specific details of the action plan. Having fought for 10 years, such arguments had almost become the norm for their communication. But in Poseidon's eyes, both of these guys were like idiots. Here they go again. Hades and Zeus are really alike in some ways, one acting dark and cool, the other obsessed with saving face. Luckily Hera isn't here, or it would be a trio. Poseidon yawned and followed lazily behind. However, this boring war is finally coming to an end. That old woman Gaia's prophecies have never failed. Compared to his brothers' bickering, Poseidon was more looking forward to the new world after the war where the gods would each perform their duties. After all, that meant, he could finally stop fighting every day and find a sea with good scenery to properly enjoy the free life a sea king should have, right? When the 3 brothers hurried and finally arrived at the legendary entrance to the lowest level of the world, Tartarus, the sight before them confirmed their estimates. At the entrance, there was indeed a dense legion of monsters with fierce auras stationed there. And guarding the center of the legion, like a stabilizing pillar, was a giant of suffocating size and terrifying, hideous form. She had the winding torso of a dragon, covered in scales that glinted with a metallic cold light. Her upper body, however, was in a robust female human form, holding heavy steel chains and a giant axe. On her back stretched bat-like fleshy wings large enough to blot out the sun. Around her neck, she was even surrounded by several heads of different beasts: lion, goat, venomous snake. Each head exuded an aura of bloodthirst and rage. Is that monster guarding the front camp? The problem is that besides camp, there are too many other monsters. A direct assault won't be quiet. We might not even have opened the gates of Tartarus before Cronus arrives with his army. Finally, after a brief discussion, it was decided that Poseidon and Hades would be responsible for launching a surprise attack from the flanks to create a massive disturbance and draw attention. Meanwhile, Zeus would sneak in during the chaos to open the bronze gates of Tartarus and rescue the hecatoncheires and cyclops within. The operation begins. Boom! Poseidon and Hades no longer hid their auras. Like 2 meteors, they slammed into the flank of the monster army. Sea blue, raging divine power and ink-black shadows of death erupted simultaneously, instantly clearing a large area. Countless monsters turned to dust amid their screams. Enemy attack. The monster army reacted quickly, but Poseidon and Hades had a clear target: camp at the center. Roar! Who dares to trespass in this forbidden place? Camp's multiple heads roared in unison. Her massive body was surprisingly agile. She turned instantly, her chains and giant axe meeting the attack with enough force to tear through space. Bang! Clang! The attack was easily blocked by Camp. Her eyes, belonging to a human female, scanned the attackers. This aura. It's you. The rebellious offspring of Lord Cronus. Blue-haired Poseidon, black-haired Hades. She recognized the enemies immediately and quickly commanded the army to surround them, cutting off their retreat. Since you've delivered yourselves to me, don't think about escaping. Once I capture you, Lord Cronus will surely reward me handsomely. Camp pressed forward step by step, her offensive fierce, as if victory were already in her grasp. This was not blind arrogance on her part. She had been ordered to guard the entrance to Tartarus, day in and day out for 10 years, never leaving. Although she had heard of the frontline battle situation and knew these divine children were powerful, she had never personally experienced it. In her view, although Poseidon and Hades were strong, she possessed absolute geographic advantage, numerical superiority, and powerful individual strength. The advantage was hers, capturing or killing them was not impossible. Meanwhile, Poseidon and Hades tacitly began their performance. They displayed a posture of being powerful enough that Camp had to go all out, yet seemingly slightly inferior and gradually being suppressed. Fighting while retreating, they slowly lured Camp and her main army away from the entrance area of Tartarus. They had to make the battle look intense and real enough so Camp wouldn't be suspicious, while also controlling the tempo to avoid actually being surrounded or ending the fight too soon. Rumble. Just then, a dull vibration came from the direction of Tartarus, as if a giant object were striking the bronze gates. But under the cover of Gaia's divine power, this impact did not spread to the outside world. At the same time, Zeus was holding his breath, observing the battle. He had to wait for the moment when Poseidon and Hades had lured Camp and her main force far enough away, with their attention completely drawn elsewhere. Finally, when Camp, in order to completely capture these two important spoils, committed the vast majority of her troops to the encirclement, Zeus moved. His figure flashed like lightning, appearing before the bronze gates of Tartarus as if by teleportation. He took out the key secretly stolen by Gaia, formed from the divine power of Cronus, and inserted it into the keyhole. Click, click, click. The heavy bronze gates slowly opened. The first things to greet Zeus's eyes were 3 cyclops, towering like small mountains. The single giant eyes on their foreheads shimmered in the darkness, filled with primal power and long-suppressed rage. Deeper inside were the hecatoncheires, with even more astonishing forms, like nightmares made manifest. 50 heads, 100 arms, each head had a different expression, yet they all uniformly radiated a bone-deep hatred for Cronus. Every arm contained enough terrifying strength to tear apart mountains. You must be Zeus. Mother mentioned you to us. That's right, Mother said you are the hero who can redeem us from this eternal darkness. Facing the overlapping echoes of those 100 voices, Zeus felt a deep shock in his heart, but he forcibly suppressed all discomfort, knowing that time was everything at this moment. He had to quickly gain the trust of these ancient giants. Yes, I am Zeus, grandson of Uranus and Gaia, son of Cronus and Rhea. Zeus straightened his back, bathing himself in his increasingly proficient thunderous divine light, striving to display the spirit a leader should have. On the orders of the Earth Mother, Gaia, I have come to rescue you all. Please lend us your strength to overthrow the tyrant Cronus, end this meaningless war, and establish a new order. The giants were silent for a brief moment. Cronus, that despicable usurper, that fool who imprisoned his own brothers. As long as we can land a heavy blow on that hateful younger brother, we are willing to do anything. But we have been imprisoned here for too long, and our strength has waned significantly. I'm afraid we cannot immediately engage in high-intensity combat. Upon hearing this, Zeus immediately took out the delicacies he had prepared from his portable space, along with the supreme divine wine that had miraculous effects on the recovery of divine bodies. Please, everyone, partake. These are divine delicacies and wine prepared specifically for you. Although it is very rude to make such a request right after rescuing you, the situation on the front lines is critical. My sister Hera is currently leading our troops, struggling to hold the line, so every bit of strength is vital. I beg you. Zeus respectfully placed the food and wine in front of the giants, his words sincere. The Hecatoncheires and Cyclops looked at the food and wine radiating enticing divine fragrance before them, and the eyes on their heads all lit up. Having been imprisoned for countless years, they were long famished, not just in body, but with a craving for the power of vengeance. Oh, you actually prepared such precious divine items. We feel your sincerity. Just as the Cyclops said, in this godforsaken place, all we think about is how to tear apart that fool who betrayed his brothers. The hatred for Cronus had long transcended everything. Even if they might be weak again afterward due to overexertion, even if they had to take risks, as long as they could severely damage or even overthrow Cronus, they would spare nothing. Then, please enjoy, everyone, and recover your strength. I must go solve that camp outside first, Zeus said urgently. Camp? That giantess who guards us. Mentioning camp, the giant's emotions seemed somewhat complex. She is also a loyal lackey of Cronus, that won't change. But during that long period of imprisonment, she occasionally quietly gave us food that wasn't so hard to swallow. Even so, she is still an enemy. But perhaps, we don't need to be as heartless as Cronus. Can we spare her life? Regarding how to deal with camp, there was some disagreement among the giants, but in the end, the opinion of sparing her life prevailed. Zeus nodded, indicating he respected their wishes. I understand. Then, I will go assist my brothers. Before the words faded, Zeus had turned into lightning, rushing out of the gates of Tartarus, speeding toward the area of the fierce battle. Poseidon, Hades, stop acting, attack. Zeus's roar, laced with thunder, spread across the battlefield instantly like a clarion call to attack. Upon hearing this sound, Poseidon and Hades, who had been struggling to maneuver, perked up almost simultaneously, expressions of, finally, a release, appearing on their faces. The next second, the aura radiating from both of them changed abruptly. The previously slightly strained disguise vanished instantly, replaced by a terrifying pressure akin to the eruption of the deep sea or the opening of the underworld. HMPH. You ugly monster, you seemed quite pleased with yourself just now, didn't you? Did you really think the two of us couldn't handle you? Poseidon grinned, blue light flaring brilliantly in his eyes. The phantom image of ocean waves around him solidified several times over, and he threw a punch that seemed to carry the resolve to shatter space itself. Although I'm not as vengeful as Poseidon, for now, I can finally get a little serious. The shadows around Hades expanded instantly, as if swallowing the surrounding light and space. Countless blades condensed from death thrust out from the shadows, leaving camp with nowhere to dodge from each strike. Hearing Zeus's voice from behind and feeling the terrifying, soaring aura of the two enemies before her, camp instantly understood the truth. Fainting to the east while attacking in the west. Their target is Tartarus. Panic surged into her heart instantly. Although she guarded this place and had not been to the front lines personally, she had heard of the terrifying battle records of these three brothers through various channels. She had originally thought that since the war on the front lines was tight, it was absolutely impossible for them to leave at the same time, let alone sneak into such a vital location. A miscalculation. A grave miscalculation. This is bad. With the combined strength of the three of them, I absolutely cannot hold out for long. I must get the message out. Camp was, after all, a veteran of many battles, and under extreme panic, she instead erupted with even greater ferocity. While frantically swinging her weapons in an attempt to fend off the suddenly ferocious onslaught of Poseidon and Hades, she used one of her goat heads to emit a peculiar screech. Subsequently, a messenger magical bird with extreme speed darted out like lightning from where the screech was emitted, flying rapidly toward the direction of Cronus's main temple. The only thing she could do now was to hold these three brothers back at all costs, to deliver the warning to Cronus. Don't think I will give up so easily. For Lord Cronus. With Zeus's joining, Camp fell into a final frenzy. However, Camp's defeat and death happened almost in the blink of an eye. This powerful guardian, a monster that had once terrified countless titans and gods, now lay miserably in a pool of blood and amidst broken scales. Her winding dragon body was covered in deep fist marks and lacerations. The scales that once shimmered with a metallic luster had peeled off in large patches, revealing the mangled flesh and tissue beneath, with thick blood flowing out like a stream. The numerous beast heads circling her neck had either been shattered by immense force or severed by sharp blades, scattered across the ground, twitching on their own and emitting dying hisses. Enough, Hades. I said before, our purpose for this trip is not to completely destroy her. The lightning around Zeus had not yet dissipated, watching Hades's stance, which looked as if he intended to completely dismember Camp. He could not help but shout a stern command to stop. Hades paused, his gaze sweeping coldly across Zeus. Zeus, since when did you have the qualifications to issue orders to me, Hades? It is not an order, Hades. This is a request from the Hecatoncheires and the Cyclops. They hope to spare her life. HMPH, so what? It dared to insult and despise me, it must never be forgiven. Hades, however, merely snorted coldly, ignoring Zeus's obstruction completely, and resolutely severed the heads of the last batch of poisonous snakes on Camp's head. Subsequently, not minding the filth, he used his divine power to weave those snake heads into a necklace and hung it around his own neck. That necklace fit his gloomy temperament strangely well, adding a bit more chilling majesty. Zeus and Poseidon, not far away, both furrowed their brows upon seeing this. Poseidon didn't really care much about whether Camp lived or died, he just felt that Hades's action was a bit too pretentious and perverted. But with a great enemy before them and the threat of Cronus imminent, this was clearly not the time to break out into infighting over a monster's life or some strange collecting habit. Both of them tacitly chose to remain silent. Zeus, stop staring. While Cronus hasn't reacted yet, immediately take those big guys and retreat to the base camp. Since the messenger was just sent out, it means we still have a little time. Poseidon broke this slightly eerie atmosphere first, pointing in the direction of Tartarus as he spoke. Zeus took a deep breath, suppressing his dissatisfaction with Hades's behavior, and nodded heavily. You are right. Let's go. He immediately turned around and rapidly led the Hecatoncheires and the Cyclops to retreat from this abyss entrance. Almost just as Zeus and the others had retreated to their own base camp, explained the situation to the gods, and began emergency preparations, Cronus finally received Camp's message. What? Poseidon, Hades, and Zeus all left the front lines at the same time and snuck into Tartarus. Cronus crushed the golden cup in his hand, his handsome face twisted by shock and rage. He knew all too well what kind of terrifying existences were imprisoned within that abyss, and he knew all too well what kind of devastating impact it would have on the war situation once those ancient giants who hated him were released. Send the order immediately. Assemble the entire army. Launch an all-out attack at any cost. We must defeat them before those monsters fully recover. Cronus's roar echoed throughout the temple, and the gears of war accelerated crazily once again. But he was still one step too late. When Cronus's Titan army surged toward the new gods, positions like a tide, they were immediately met with attacks from the Hecatoncheires, who had been waiting there for a long time. Boom, 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 boom. 50 heads let out earth-shattering roars, and 100 arms that seemed capable of plucking stars and grasping the moon swung simultaneously. Each arm was entwined with immense ancient divine power. The Titan generals charging at the very front could not even manage to unleash their signature powers and artifacts before they were sent flying like trash, screaming like dolls. Ordinary Titan warriors could not even get close before being blasted into powder by the rampaging force fields and shockwaves. One side of the battlefield was instantly cleared, leaving a large blank space. What are these monsters? It's the Hecatoncheires. The ancient giants imprisoned by Lord Cronus. They have been released. Terrified cries rang out from within the Titan army formation, and their originally unstoppable offensive faltered. This bunch of accursed brothers. To think they would hold their ground to the end and ruin my grand plan. Cronus stood on his chariot, looking at the Hecatoncheires, who were like moving natural disasters, his teeth gnashing with a clattering sound, his eyes filled with venomous resentment. If I had known this would happen, perhaps I should have. Hey, family. Brothers. Cronus, we have never considered a despicable villain like you, who betrayed and imprisoned his brothers, as family. The overlapping voices of the Hecatoncheires rolled over the battlefield like thunder, striking at Cronus's heart. Cronus's expression was grim. He watched the local battle situation, which had instantly reversed due to the Hecatoncheires' participation, and sensed the rapidly approaching, powerful auras of Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades in the distance. If he continued to attack forcefully, it would likely evolve into a bloody battle with heavy casualties. Pass the order, retreat. In the end, Cronus had to grit his teeth and issue the order to retreat. When Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades returned safely to the camp and reunited with Hera and the others, the entire camp of the new generation of gods erupted in earth-shattering cheers. Gaia's prophecy was gradually becoming reality, and the scales of victory seemed to have begun to tilt irreversibly. Everyone realized that the decade-long war between the Titans and the new generation of gods had finally seen the dawn of the final decisive battle. Zeus, although Lady Gaia's prophecy is coming to pass and the situation is in our favor, we must not let our guard down at this moment. Inside the tent, Métis snuggled up beside Zeus, her red hair cascading like a waterfall, yet her beautiful face wore an unshakable worry. I know, Métis. Zeus held her hand, feeling the warmth and support emanating from her palm. Until now, we still haven't been able to truly and completely suppress Father Cronus head-on. His powers over time and harvest are too troublesome, and his foundation is deeper than ours. HMPH. What kind of father is he? Hera let out a cold snort, interrupting Zeus's slightly sentimental words. She had changed into a dark red, form-fitting battle armor designed for combat, which outlined her breathtaking curves. Her red hair was tied into a neat ponytail, and her stunning face was full of decisiveness. He is nothing more than an enemy we must defeat. Now that the Hecatoncheires are holding back the main force of the Titans, we can concentrate our strength to completely eliminate Cronus, the root of all evil. Métis' worry was based on meticulous global awareness, while Hera's proposal was based on the sharpness needed to break the stalemate. But Poseidon, as an anomaly, knew deep down that because of his existence, the direction of the prophecy had long since become more bewildering and complex than the original myth. This did not mean they currently lacked the power to suppress or even defeat Cronus. The problem was, Hera, the idea is good. But we can't put all our energy into Cronus alone. Although the Titan army is intimidated by the Hecatoncheires, their numbers are vast, and they still have many high-end combatants. On our side, counting everyone, there are only the 6 of us, plus the giants we just rescued. Poseidon leaned against a tent pole, arms crossed, pouring a bucket of cold water on the idea. Poseidon is right. Demeter and I have already exhausted most of our energy just protecting the many goddesses and nymphs who follow us, as well as the rear supply lines, and defending against the Titans' sneak attacks and infiltration. Hestia's gentle yet firm voice rang out. She had changed out of her usual elegant dress and was wearing a suit of silver-white light armor adorned with patterns of eternal fire. Her platinum blonde hair was simply tied up, and her emerald eyes held a trace of exhaustion. Demeter also nodded, wearing pale gold vine-like light armor, holding a wheat-ear scepter symbolizing abundance and restraint, and chiming in gently. Hera fell silent. She had to admit that her 2 sisters were speaking the truth. While high-level duels were important, the victory of the war also depended on the stability of the lower and middle ranks and the guarantee of logistics. No matter how strong they were, they could not be in 10,000 places at once to cover everything. Just then, the tent flap was lifted. Three figures, as large as small mountains, bent down and squeezed in. They were the three Cyclops brothers, Brontes the Thunderer, Steropus the Lightning, and Argus the Thunderbolt. We happened to pass by and heard your troubles. If you lack quantity, make up for it with quality. Suppressing firepower is enough to solve most problems. The three Cyclops confidently declared that they would forge stronger and more destructive weapons for the new gods, crushing all obstacles with absolute firepower superiority. Thus, in the days that followed, the three Cyclops brothers displayed their terrifying talents as the most outstanding craftsmen and gods of the forge. Zeus received a long spear, the Thunderbolt, which gathered the essence of the most violent thunder in the sky. Poseidon obtained a trident that was entirely azure blue, as if it had been condensed from the essence of the entire ocean. Hades received a helm of darkness that could perfectly conceal his aura and figure, and could also transform to release death gaze, rays that annihilated life. They also refurbished and reinforced Hera's crown, making it not only capable of amplifying her magical power but also a powerful artifact for mental defense and domination. At the same time, they forged a scepter of heaven that perfectly matched her attributes. They even used precious materials containing Gaia's primordial divine power to weave a veil of earthly protection, unrecorded in myths, and gifted it to Demeter. For Hestia, they forged the never-extinguishing, sacred fire poker, and a portable altar that could be carried and deployed at any time. Furthermore, the Cyclops custom made a full 150 inches divine power bombardment cannons for the Hecatoncheires that could be carried and fired mobile ly, completely solving the giant's weakness of being invincible in melee combat but lacking long-range AoE. Firepower is the eternal truth. Absolute superiority in firepower can make all tactics and struggles meaningless. What we need is explosions. This group of Cyclops seemed like deities with a pathological obsession with firepower. In addition to crafting top-tier artifacts, they also continuously produced various models of divine power catapults, elemental bombs, and rapid bombardment vehicles for the coalition. Looking at the bustling military factory, Poseidon couldn't help but complain internally. Could these guys have transmigrated from some place suffering from firepower deficiency phobia in their past lives? And the effect was immediate. On the battlefield, the Hecatoncheires, armed with the new weaponry, completely transformed into mobile war fortresses. They held a divine power bombardment cannon in each hand, and a full 150 heavy cannons roared simultaneously. Brilliant and deadly beams of divine power poured down like a rainstorm onto the Titan army formation, and wherever they passed, mountains collapsed, the earth cracked, and divine bodies shattered. Absolute long-range firepower began to dominate the battlefield. Meanwhile, Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon, having gained the enhancement of their artifacts and with their divine names and authorities fully awakened and integrated, saw their strength leap once again. With the three of them joining forces, even with Cronus's exquisite time authority and strange harvest laws, he began to struggle and found it difficult to parry. This also meant that within the Titan camp, no one else could stand alone against the edge of any one of these three brothers. After officially receiving the blessing of her mother Rhea and the recognition of her grandmother Gaia's will, Hera donned the inherited crown and grasped her scepter, her power fully blossoming, and her magic became even more grand and commanding. Demeter donned the veil of earthly protection, and her authority over abundance and restraint was greatly enhanced. Hestia wielded the sacred fire poker and the portable altar, and her power of protection and purification covered a wider range with stronger effects. Through the tempering of the long war, the six siblings finally fully mastered and unleashed the full power of their divine names. With the terrifying firepower provided by the Cyclops and the frontal-crushing power of the Hecatoncheires, the coalition of the new generation of gods advanced like a hot knife through butter, forcing the once arrogant Titans coalition step by step into a desperate situation. Of Cronus's vast kingdom, only the core region remained, struggling to hold on under the desperate resistance of a few loyalist Titans, the rest of the territory had either fallen or the Titans there had been taken prisoner. Finally, when the coalition forces reached the city walls and surrounded the last temple, Cronus stood on the dilapidated city wall, looking down at the high-spirited enemy army below, at the 6 children who radiated a powerful aura that felt both strange and unsettling to him, and at those roaring ancient giants, letting out a long sigh toward the sky. Ah, Gaia's prophecy has come to pass after all. In the end, I could not defeat my mother, nor could I defeat that destined fate. To overthrow my father, to usher in the Golden Age, and yet, in the end, was I still just a pawn and a plaything in the power struggle of the primordial gods. A complex smile appeared on his handsome face, resembling both mockery and sorrow. Atlas. He looked at his son standing beside him, covered in blood but still standing stubbornly tall. Open the city gates. Since the defeat is certain, I shall yield to Gaia's will. Cronus walked down from the city wall and personally pushed open the gate that symbolized his rule for several eons. He walked step by step toward the 6 siblings standing in battle formation, toward those ancient giants filled with hatred, and toward the gaze of countless eyes. Finally, he stopped and bowed his head in defeat. You have won. I, Cronus, the second king of the gods, admit defeat. The Golden Age has passed. What comes next is the new era that belongs to you. Following Cronus's admission of defeat, the entire army erupted into cheers that pierced the clouds. Victory! We won! Long live Zeus! Long live Poseidon! Long live Hades! Long live Hera! Long live Demeter! Long live Hestia! 10 years of bloody war, countless sacrifices, finally, at this moment, the ultimate victory was achieved. Ellipsis. The events that followed proceeded logically. The 6 gods captured all the remaining Titans and temporarily imprisoned them within Cronus's magnificent palace, which had already changed hands. Subsequently, they summoned all the Titans who had distinguished themselves in the battle, such as Prometheus, Oceanus, etc., and the new gods to convene a meeting to decide the post-war world order. One of the agenda items was how to dispose of these defeated Titans. The primary question is, how should we handle the captives? Zeus looked around at everyone and spoke first. First, there is one point I think everyone will agree on. We must not let them remain on the earth. Their power is too great, even if part of their divine power is sealed, they remain a huge destabilizing factor. Hera suggested coldly. But Hera, you should know that ordinary places of imprisonment cannot hold them. Even the deepest mountain prisons, with their immense power, could be broken open in time. And we cannot make them perform hard labor like ordinary prisoners. Demeter said softly, her brows slightly furrowed. Even though we are stronger than them now, their essential power remains. Forcing them to labor would not only be inefficient, but could also trigger unexpected resistance and disaster. I agree with Demeter's point of view. Poseidon offered his opinion, which was rare. Unless we guard them ourselves, it is difficult to fully suppress them. But we cannot guard them forever. Then, how about banishing them to the depths of the underworld? Styx suggested. The environment of the underworld is unique, it can weaken the activity of their divine power and it is isolated from the world. Styx, that is a good proposal. Hades finally spoke as well, unusually refraining from using his usual edgy tone. But that would still require arranging a sufficiently powerful force to monitor them day and night. The underworld has only just been established and its foundations are not yet stable. Putting so many dangerous elements inside is undoubtedly a huge risk and burden. Furthermore, Zeus took over the conversation, his gaze sweeping across everyone, lingering for a moment on the faces of the few Titans who leaned toward Gaia. They are, after all, the children of the goddess Gaia. Would banishing them to the underworld cause dissatisfaction and interference from the Earth Mother? We have just ended the war with Cronus, must we immediately face the wrath of another primordial god? Zeus, what do you mean then? Hera asked directly. Zeus took a deep breath, as if having made a certain decision, and slowly uttered that name. Tartarus. Zeus's proposal plunged the entire room into silence. Tartarus, that was the primordial abyss, the eternal prison that held the first generation of gods, a forbidden zone that even Gaia's will could hardly fully penetrate. Because Poseidon knew the trajectory of the myths, he did not feel surprised, only his eyes flickered slightly. But the others, whether new gods or titans, all wore expressions of shock. To cast the defeated titans, including Cronus himself, into that abyss of despair where even the names of gods would wither. Lord Zeus. Is this not too? A neutral titan could not help but speak up. Too cruel. Too ruthless. Zeus's voice became cold and hard, carrying a bit of the majesty and decisiveness expected of a new king. Everyone, please think. Besides Tartarus, where else in this world can ensure they are imprisoned forever, without us having to worry day and night? Where else can completely sever their connection with the outside world, especially Gaia? He looked around at everyone, his gaze finally landing on his brothers and sisters. They are not just our blood kin, they are enemies who fought us in a bloody war for 10 years, causing countless casualties. Mercy to the enemy is cruelty to our own. Should we, because of a moment of hesitation, bury the seeds of future subversion for the victory we fought so hard to win? Zeus is right. Hera was the first to state her position, cold flames burning in her red eyes. In order to usher in the era that truly belongs to us, we must completely eliminate these hidden dangers. Tartarus is the most suitable choice. Hades was silent for a moment, his face in the shadows revealing no emotion, and finally he slowly uttered 2 words. Seconded. Demeter and Hestia looked at each other, both seeing complex expressions in the other's eyes. There was reluctance regarding the fate of their former father and uncles, exhaustion from the long war, and even more, a cherishing of the hard-won peace. They were, after all, not indecisive gods. I abstain, Demeter said softly. I also abstain, Hestia said in a low voice. At this moment, everyone's gaze finally fell upon Poseidon, who had yet to state his position. That's the end of part 1. Part 2 is coming soon.
Thanks for watching my video. Please like and share it.